It's a small.
Has to do the introduction.
Yeah, I just thought we could wait for another 5 minutes. Is that okay? Thank you.
So how is the idea? What I do अच्छा आप डायरेक्टली SELCO से बात करके बात हुई है इन्होंने टैक्स में कुछ
So the territory that comes with the territory. Now we start. Of the first day.
चित्र को समझ
He's not blocked, no?
Bangalore में इसको
You are coming here for the. Can I help you?
what type of split?
By 6 p.m.
No, for this time.
And then 7 immediately we have to leave today or we have to time time? There's only till 6. And what happens from 6 to 7?
Friday night, 7 o'clock.
छूट जाऊंगा तो 7 बजे तो start होगा।
आप आते हैं
हो जाते हैं वो टाइम पे जो
Hello. Good afternoon. Can we start? Good afternoon. Hope you had a good lunch and you're ready for this next session. Like my colleague Geetu already said, entrepreneurs have this pressure to fail fast and learn fast. And we know that's not easy, but possible. So I'll not take much of your time. It's our pleasure to have Mr. Anand, Ms. Prerna, and Arjun. Wilma will introduce Anand Shri Ganesh for this session. And can I please hand over the mic to the moderator?
Thank you. Thank you so much for being here. Quick context to what we will try to do over the next hour or so is try to evaluate or understand the idea of failures through an entrepreneur's lens and what it takes to navigate the journey. And what could the entrepreneur have learned from that journey to carry on the path forward? Some ground rules for today. Don't go to sleep. It's very important. We will do about an 8 minutes talk with each of my panelists. And after that, we'll do a Q&A I've got a few thoughts that I want to share with the panelists, and we'll open it up for questions around as well. We'll have mics that we'll pass around when we do the Q&A, and there are speaker slots in each of your desks, so you can speak to them as well. Let's kickstart the afternoon. The perspective of NSR Cell, and if I don't do a plug for NSR Cell, it'll be really bad. We are the NS Raghavan Center for Entrepreneurial Learning. I am Bangalore's incubation center, startup hub. And one of the reasons that we are passionate about this next 1 hour is because as an incubator, it's our unstated mission to help the incubation process reduce entrepreneurial mortality. I've got some of my founders and ventures here, so be very careful about what I'm saying now. The idea is, can incubation reduce the risk of the journey of an entrepreneur? And what does it take for an entrepreneur to be prepared for the sine curve of risks through their journeys? That lens is a huge learning for us. And I do hope through the next 1 hour, I'm able to learn as much as some of you guys are. We will start the afternoon, Wilma, with yourself. Wilma is the founder CEO of Sahas. Disclosure, I am Bangalore is a client of Sahas. So very, very, very clean. And Wilma, over to you.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone. Happy to be here and happy to share this story. So I could just have the presentation up. So Sahas Zero Waste. We work with waste, and just some quick points while the presentation is coming up. Bangalore generates about 5,000 tons of waste per day. India generates about 62 million tons of solid waste per year. And, as organizations like us, we believe waste is a resource. So, our whole thinking and processes are around resource recovery. So, I'll just go to the next slide. So I was fortunate to read this book by Arjun, which put me on the path to understand areas where, wrong turns have been taken. And he made this compelling image through Humpty Dumpty. Yeah, when he said that, look, Humpty Dumpty lies shattered in pieces because we in the development sector don't know how to put pieces together. And so I was just thinking about it. I'm looking that in the space where I am in right now, when we look at ecology and economics, the root word is eco or oikos or home, our planet. And yet you have ecology and environment that is supposed to work with people and planet, bring people and planet together, not really happening. And that is also something that I see in the approach that I took 20 years ago. When you look at the fact that economics and environment, or rather economics and ecology, is something that was very disjointed in the whole approach that we took. And that is reflected, if I can go to the next slide, that is reflected in these three important aspects that I look at. One is systems thinking, the other is ethical reasoning, and the third is deep listening. So in my journey, next slide, so this is my last slide. In my journey, the starting point for me was a clean city. Yeah, how do we have more waste on our streets? And that was the motivation for me to start an NGO, a not-for-profit that worked extensively in the first years, and we started now, this is 20 years plus, in 2001. We looked at all the aspects of what were the problems and worked with so many different problems. So there was reduce, of course, that was the first aspect that we took up through campaigns, less plastic for me. There was source segregation and working with the local body, the BBMP, for door-to-door collection. There was processing of waste through private collection centers. So all of these things were done in a rather smooth manner. Of course, the fact is that when you're working as an NGO, you are looking at projects. Each one is a project and each one has a limited time. Each one of it, there's pressure for results which may or may not come. So there was really the lack of holistic coming together and systemic thinking of the whole solution. So 10 years is where the NGO and I worked very, very closely. We had a good team and all of that. But then I realized that for a holistic solution, we needed to have a business model. And so that's the reason why the NGO gave birth to a new baby, so to speak, which is Sahas Zero Waste or Sahas Waste Management Private Limited. And then we put together the whole business model. We today have 3 verticals. The first vertical works on campuses to create zero waste campuses, and that's how IMB is our customer. We track, trace a lot of processes, a good professional system. We also work with plastic waste and electronic waste, helping the brands have a reverse logistics system. And then we have our third vertical, which is looking at closing the loop through sale of products. So we have a good system right now through the business model. But where do we stand today? We are at about 100 tons plus of waste being managed, resources recovered. We have a staff about 300 people, or we are like a 44 crore company. This year will be about an 80 crore company. But the biggest, I would say, I won't call it failure, but the biggest gap that I see is that whilst we are 300 people and we are very clear that we are working on environmental and social impact. So social impact is a big part of our deliverable. And today when we have 300 people taking care of their social needs, minimum wages, social security, all of that, I look and say what happened to the 3 million people in the informal sector. And that is the big gap that I see. The integration of the informal sector, which can do wonderful work, but has not been really considered for the kind of capacities that they have. Because today, even at Sahas Zero Waste, we are taking care of our 300 staff, and we realize that there needs to be that whole social inclusion that takes place, so that with all the complexities that are there in the system, they can also be integrated. Some of the reasons why we've not worked so far with the informal sector is because of poor delivery of services. Sometimes it's very difficult to get accountability from the informal sector. Sometimes, the kind of efficiencies that are expected from organizations like us, that is not there. But that still does not give us a reason why we cannot integrate them into the whole formal workforce. So today we really work now on a social inclusion program included in our business, and we have a lot of attention given to social inclusion. So I have just 8 minutes and I'm mindful of the time, and I will make this last statement looking at the fact that I hope today, when we're looking at bringing together ecology and economics, we will somewhere put behind the economics of a Milton Friedman, who talked about shareholder value, who talked about maximum profitability. And I hope, Professor, that IMB now also, starts looking at it a bit differently and starts introducing students and entrepreneurs like those of you in the room to donut economics, and that of the economics of the new 21st century economics, and that is cake Trevor and donut economics. Because I think it is happening, and to end on a positive note, it is happening that the whole changing systems are taking place and the pieces are coming together. So I definitely have hope that we will put together Humpty Dumpty again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Wilma. I absolutely love it when someone calls me a professor. I'm not, but it's a perfect segue, because Arjun, our next speaker, was a professor of electrical engineering at IIT Bombay, a PhD from WISMAD, and decided to turn entrepreneur. Would love to hear your journey. And I think a lot part of what you're going to be focusing on is deep technology and early stage deep technology product development. I'd love to also hear a bit about your journey. How did, as Wilma has provoked us, how did an academician turn entrepreneur?
Sure, thank you. I'll keep it short. So I'm representing a company called Voxel Grids. We are based out of Bangalore, and our job is to build MRI scanners, and not just any routine MRI scanners. We build a new type of MR scanner. But I'll go through my journey a little bit because it will give context to the discussion that you want to have. So I studied at the University of Wisconsin, and specifically the education choice that I made also was with the intent of eventually doing something back home here. Why that is the case, I don't know. I was always wanting to live here, which is natural because it's my home, but do something different and not work for a big company because, too restless or whatever, some flaws. But anyway, so in 2005, I was done with my PhD and I went to work at GE Research. The really cool thing about GE Research was that it was the lab where the first MRI scanner was built. So a lot of the people there narrowly missed Nobel Prizes, and I could sit with them and I had all their notes. And then, so it was great to work with them. And it's impossible now to find an ecosystem where such an interdisciplinary field, a team that has all facets of it covered under one roof can be found. It's just too disparate now. So I was there for 3 years. And then in 2008, October, I quit and I said, I'll spend about a couple of years trying to see if I can start something on my own. So I spent a lot of time traveling, meeting potential vendors, people who might want to work with us, even people who are professors in India, etc. And so after a year of doing that, we can go to the next slide. Basically, I stopped because while I did build a network, none of it fructified into anything tangible. Certainly not from a funding point of view. Nobody wanted to hear anything about capex intensive deep tech effort. Forget it. So I felt that I had some options. I could go back to GE or somebody, or go work in IIT, and I joined IIT because nobody cares what you do there. So I had all the time and the space in the world to continue focusing on my research. I used to spend a lot of time in Trivandrum because we didn't have an MR scanner in IIT, so I used to go down to Trivandrum where they had all the software in the scanner, but they didn't know what to do with it. I was very happy to give it to me and work. So I did some good work and started becoming creative again. And for 3 months, my wife got a job in Singapore. And so I felt, financially it's much better to go there. So we went and there. I was, taking care of my daughter and just staying home. But the good thing is that there was a scheme for getting a small amount of money through a grant. Actually, you front end and get reimbursed. So we got that money, and I built a small platform there and did some basic testing there and got some IP. I felt IP out of that could be useful. And then I think it stopped again because there's no ecosystem to fund the next level, which was several $1 million. Who funds that for an idea on paper? But I got in touch with Tata Trust, and the managing trustee there was Venkat at that point. And he called me. He said, "You're living in Singapore. Why the hell will I fund you?" I said, "No, I'm not working here. I'm going to do it in India." So he asked me where I studied. It turned out his brother-in-law was a very close friend of mine in graduate school. So he said, "Great, I have my reference. Come over and talk to me." So I went to met him and he said, "We'll fund you." I mean, they didn't have a mechanism to do that, and he put me in touch with Social Alpha. So that long story short, Manoj, I met Manoj and he said, "We'll fund you," and they funded us to the tune of $1 million for an idea on paper. And so we'll go to the next slide, please. So that was our first team. So to the right is Shankar. Shankar, if you ever get scanned on a GMR scanner, he's the guy who built all the tables and everything. Fantastic mechanical engineer. Swati, she was a fresh graduate. So it was her first job. If you talk to her today, you wouldn't realize it. She owns the whole software platform for an MR scanner. And she can put it all together actually. And then it's me, and there's Kamraj and Sai Ramesh. They're all mechanical engineers and RF engineers. And this is actually taken in Manoj's home. We started there. And then, so eventually we got together and we put together a scanner. We functioned out of the Social Alpha office, and we also got a lot of grant support from the government of India. We have raised money to the tune of almost 16 crores from the government of India, a huge amount of money by any standard. So we can go to the next slide, please. This is a scanner that's been installed in Whitefield. I took this photo in 2018 where the first images were generated. So I stopped now because after 2014, a lot happened. From funding to many things, but I'll just say that last year we were funded by the Zoho Corporation to the tune of $5 million. And we were, I guess a few weeks away from at least releasing images in the public domain. We're today 30 employees strong. Any journey like this, especially, and we build Arjun Panelist, we build patient tables, we write all the software, physics. We do virtually everything, which is very rare for any company. We're a small company. We are 30 employees today. We're based out of India. And so, as you can imagine, lots of ups and downs have obviously happened. It's not a straight journey. And I'll be happy to elaborate on that, but I'll stop now. This is, in a nutshell, the last 15, 20 years. Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Arjun. I do have a ton of questions for you. I'll hold down.
Sure.
I'll invite Anand to speak. Wilma, to provoke you further, we have another PhD, from MIT Biochemistry.
I started as a chemical engineer, then moved into biology. So don't ask me why on some of those flaws.
And came back to India 2005 to do something at the grassroots level. And an outstanding, a very inspiring journey of Remedio. Would love to hear your journey.
Okay, thank you so much. Thanks to SELCO Foundation for the opportunity. The idea is, I think a lot has been talked on the product innovation side. So I'll be focusing on learnings, failures, and impact on delivery innovation. That is how do you take a product to market and how do you actually have impact, and the failures that we have had in doing that as well. What Remedio is into the idea or vision of moving eye testing to primary care. Today, many of us may be visiting ophthalmologists. So the quick nutshell way of looking at it is to ask the question, how do you take all those devices that are there, put them in a bag and make that available in primary care or in public health centers? Next slide. So there are just 4 key diseases that are responsible for 95% of vision impairment. The ones that are very, very common, we have to know about it in terms of refractive error. But there are both acute as well as chronic diseases, especially chronic diseases that affect the back of the eye, called the retina. And the learns at least around 1 billion people globally that actually need access to both care and testing. Now, but one of the problems that we have today is in India, you have one ophthalmologist for 1 lakh patients, right? And secondly, today what's very interesting is, even though we have a paucity of ophthalmologists, 70% of their time is not on treatment, but is actually to find out who has the problem. So one of the questions we ask ourselves is, can we move from this centralization of testing? Is there a way by which we can move all of this testing closer to the patient, which is really a lot of the fundamental hypothesis behind what we do. Next slide. So how do you think we can solve this problem is to decentralize testing. So we moved it from a specialist clinic to, for example, labs, hospitals, primary care and public health centers. I'll be primarily focusing on what's called federally qualified health centers, which are centers in the US and public health centers in India, because these are solutions that we actually bring to bear both in the India market and in the US market. Next slide. So these are, for example, the sets of technologies that were developed ground up, because these are technologies that had to be designed for new users. They are meant for health workers, they are meant for nurse practitioners in primary care. So all of those devices that are big had to become small, and more importantly, everyone focused on affordability, but we also had to focus on simplicity. So that's a lot on the product side. And that's married with AI algorithms that work on the edge on the devices itself. So since Arjun's covered some of what goes through in terms of either resources, funding, etc., how to make products, that is the part that I will not be covering on. But what instead I thought I'll focus on is what were the challenges in bringing these to market and what were the failures that we had in doing that. Next slide. So if you look at the so what about previous slide and just wait up. This is, for example, we work very closely with the government of Kerala. And one of the first things we did is when you have a technology and you want to work with the government, we realized very early that a program of using the technology cannot be driven by us alone. So we said we need someone independent of us to drive credibility for the use of these devices in these programs. It's not enough just because it's regulatory approved. Is it relevant from a return on investment for the government perspective? Is it actually doing what it seeks to do in terms of impact? So we work very closely with the NHS in UK. And so we had researchers from NHS come over, design trials around the use of these devices and ask 3 questions. 1, is there impact? How do you quantify impact? 2, what is the return on investment? Also came about as part of this particular guidelines that came out from the professional society, the Ophthalmology Society. Next slide. Now, let's now get to all the failures. We are very happy, right? We got the technology right, we got the right, we got the policy right, we got the guidelines. He said Control C, Control V. Let's take Kerala. Let's now apply the same thing in Tamil Nadu. Let's apply the same thing in Orissa. And so we did have our failures because we realized that in India, the technology may be the same, but the programs using the technology have to be designed ground up. Kerala had the advantage of registries, NCD registries, by which we could identify those who needed what we call risk-based or opportunistic testing and screening. But we needed to start working with the government towards setting these up. So capacity building was the next phase of what we started to have to do. Next slide. The second is, we realized that success in testing did not translate to success in care. Because what happens is we confronted a very interesting behavioral problem. The person to whom we said that you need to, in the next 1 to 1.5 months time, go to the specialist and get the treatment done. And by the way, this is available free of charge here, still did not go. And what was the most interesting reason was because he said, I can still see properly, so why do I need to go? And that's a behavioral problem that we needed to get into. So that's the second part of we still have had failure in terms of care gap closure. So one of the things I like to say is we do now tender devices. We try to tender for programs where we say that, look, let's do a program using these devices. Let's not think in terms of just keeping devices. Lastly, and I'll stop with this, which is we still don't know whether this is a success or failure. And working with the government takes time, right? And so you need to sustain yourself as a company. So what we did was we decided to open a mature ecosystem like the US, where they still use our devices. In fact, we have double the number of installations in the US than public health centers in India. That in a way allowed us to be able to cross-subsidize and at the same time also get learnings from there here and learnings from here there. Which is a sort of what I wanted to end with, which is it allows you to be able to go away from traditional capital equipment-based models to what we call recurring revenue models, which are very, very relevant when you want to be able to sustain yourself even as your heart is in the right place. But one of the questions that we always ask ourselves is, are we losing focus as well? So I'll leave it with that as some points for us to think about, and also we may be able to look at maybe other models, but we'll stop with that. And thanks so much once again for the opportunity.
Thank you so much, Anand. Can you hold on? We'll finish another speaker and we'll do questions. Thank you so much, Anand. I absolutely loved a PhD talking about recurring business models. I want to drill down on that in a few minutes. Absolutely loved it. We'll move to Pia. After 2 PhDs, we have a biker. He's biked 17,000 kilometers all across South Asia, Southeast Asia, and written a book on it. Yeah. And she's urban planner turned entrepreneur. Would love to hear your journey. You're doing something very fascinating, truly at the bottom of the pyramid. Tell us a bit.
Will we run the video?
You can run the video. Yeah.
Just to set the context.
आपल्याला बरेचसे प्रॉब्लेम आपले सॉल्व्ह होतात. ऍपमुळे म्हणजे कसं बराचसा वेळ वाचला गेला ऍपमुळे, आणि आपल्याला पटकन कळतं की आपल्याला किती प्रॉफिट झालंय. प्रत्येक महिलेकडे मोबाईल असतो, मग ती एंट्री तुम्ही मोबाईलमध्ये पटकन करू शकता. वही आणि पेन घेण्यापेक्षा मोबाईल हा जास्त सोयीस्कर होतो.
Okay. I didn't realize that the subtitles are so small. Apologies, but I hope you all got the gist of what she's talking about, right? She's using a piece of technology to manage her business. So, yes.
Why don't you start by telling us a little bit about Mera Bills? We got the gist. Tell us the story.
Sure. I would thank you first. I'd like to thank you so much for having me here. This is extremely exciting. So Mera Bills basically came out of actually the bike ride. So after having ridden about 17,000 kilometers across Southeast Asia, that is Laos, Thailand, Vietnam, Cambodia, and India, one thing that came to me was that this country is very large. There are lots of very many small businesses, and that they support a lot of families. So millions and millions kind of a thing. So the thing is, if you really want to, sort of look at it closer, let's see what the issues are. And the issues came to the front very easily. One, everybody has a phone. So it's like you ride around the Indian hinterland, many people have the penetration of the phone is fairly good. They're all looking at YouTube video, at that time, TikTok and so on. So they actually have a piece of 5,000, 6,000 rupees equipment in their hand, which should be put to better use. But all of them also have a business.
most of the businesses are not doing very well, or at least they don't seem to know. You get out of Bangalore, Hyderabad, and you go to one of these small shops, you can have like 6 cups of tea, 8 packets of 5 rupee biscuits, and the bill will come to 60 rupees. And you really wonder, like, what is happening here? So the next question would automatically be, so, how much do you make in a month? And those answers were just not there. If you don't know, and we like overeducated folk are like, what you can't measure, you can't improve. So it started with so yeah. So what you measure, so how does one measure this? How does this measuring help them? And how does it really, push the envelope further? So when I came back and read about what the RBI had already done a lot of work, there was a lack of appropriate technology. There was identified lack of access to formal financing, infrastructure, reaching marketplaces, not being digital, and so on. So fortunately, my partner, who's not here, is from IIT Bombay, the quintessential geek, worked in Microsoft for 25 years, built for the world. And the idea was, can we build something for this woman entrepreneur, rural in India? And fortunately, we were able to bring, after talking to lots of people, lots of women in particular, and lots of people, we brought together an app, which you saw, Mera Bills it's called, to help the small business owner manage, their business. And what started out with bookkeeping, we realized, and that was one of the pivots to some extent, was that like all good entrepreneurs, she's interested in making more money, which means more customers. First, I want to market, then I will measure. So it was like, shall we get her to first be able to, create her catalog, be able to share that catalog on WhatsApp, be able to, do her bookkeeping so that we can show a P&L, which will be able to get her a loan better, because the bankers now can see what's happening with the business, which up till now was key based on things like, is this house yours? Is this motorcycle yours? Does your child go to school? The MFI, the SHG model works in that way. So can we formalize her? So that's where we are. And we are working now with folk like the World Bank and several governments, Tamil Nadu government, the Assamese government, and a bunch of other people. So.
Who is your customer? I know you showed the lady, but to help us understand what's the profile.
Right. So she is, she runs a business. This one was a particularly star user. We typically also work with a lot of organizations that are looking at deeper rural. So she may even have a couple of cows, maybe a goat, sells vegetables sometimes during season. Other seasons, she also does tailoring. She could be working in the field. So there is, in fact, she has multiple occupations during the year. That is very deep rural. We also have people who have been trained at NSDC who, do mushroom farming, we have beautypreneurs in second and third tier in rural areas. My God, the beautypreneur business, by the way, in rural areas, and a lot of event management in rural areas, makeup artists. I mean, these are businesses that are there, and a lot of our users are. So it's typically somebody. It's not a kirana store so much. It is somebody who does 15 to 20 transactions a day, does a lot on udhar. So she has to manage her credit receivables. She has about 25, 30 at most, maybe much less SKUs. And she wants to grow. So
how many customers or beneficiaries right now?
We have about 24,000 downloads. We've trained about 15,000 women entrepreneurs, which has given us a lot of learning, how to engage with, and this is because we're working with partnerships right now. We started the app, we went live in August 2020. So very much in the early phase of our journey. So yeah.
Couple of thoughts there, but I got stuck by when you said we train the woman entrepreneur.
Yeah.
I might be a bit of a snob, my apologies, but basic digital literacy, basic financial literacy. I mean, you're asking them to do accounting, and I'm starting to believe you have to start with arithmetic, and you're asking them to use an app, and which means you're engaging with a smartphone. How did you traverse that journey of just understanding how to use a device for a purpose?
Yeah, actually, we started at the other end. Since I said my partner is a technocrat and my husband works in Google. So the understanding was, if you make the app correctly and simply enough, you do not need training. But as you brought out, the solution is the bit that we really needed to address. It's not so much of making an app alone, but what we realized is, as we work with partners, you're right, not only digital, but we were talking about financial concepts. these were some of the ladies were not very sure how much profit they make. How does one measure profit? But more interestingly, we came across a question, why do I want to know? And that is a hard question to beat. Like, why do I want to know? I have to do this business in any case. I'm doing tailoring, money is coming into my hand, money is going out of my hand. Yes, of course, we saw as people began to understand better and say, I realize this business is not making me that much money. Why am I trying to get a loan for this? Why am I trying to sell my gold bangles for this? Maybe I should just do something else. And that, I think, was a win. Even though she may not become a customer and stop that business at that point, but she at least got what it takes to, start a business.
So you're actually training them. So so you'll go and run, like, I'm imagining education sessions. You'll find a community hall or a Maidan and teach.
Close enough. But we do a training of trainers. So we work with partners. See, the thing is, we're talking about rural India, where you are not going to do things retail. You can't just walk into a place and say, here is a place.
Exactly.
So you have to go with partners who are already over there, who have social equity, who you go in and say, listen, here is what I have. And they're like, yeah, we don't have a tool. We would like our women entrepreneurs to understand it, or entrepreneurs, simply because you probably know the number of entrepreneurship development programs in this country is growing every day. We can train them all to become entrepreneurs, train them that, how to write a business plan, how to skill them on various things. But who's going to help sustain this business? They will sustain this business once they understand what is my profit, what is how do I go to the next stage, what money am I making? You can, all the good heartfelt emotions on one side, but money and making money and managing money is its own thing, right? Cash flow is king. Everything else is nice too.
You launched right in the middle of the pandemic. You said April 2020.
August 2020. Yeah.
Even worse. Okay.
Yeah.
You launched an almost consumer product, completely T4 distribution, middle of the pandemic. How do you figure out awareness, adoption? Which geographies are your 24,000 customers in, and where did you start?
Actually, it's pan-India. But we started with Maharashtra. We still have our largest customer base in Maharashtra. But we are working with Seva Bharat. We are working with Buzz Women out of Karnataka and so on. So yeah, we got very lucky because we had a partner in Maharashtra who was part of this thing. And I must tell you the story. Okay? We also said the same thing. These ladies and they run they have a cooperative bank on the one hand, and women only, run by women, for women, by women. And they also have a foundation where they train these women to manage their businesses. So they said, sure, we can have you train that. And my question was, in the middle of the pandemic, when there's no business running, should we be talking to them about how to manage a non-running business? Isn't that like, putting salt on things? And the answer that came back truly made me understand what social development looks like. Because she said, but they're sitting empty, khali. I mean, they're not doing anything. They're sitting by themselves. And if we tell them that here is a way to build your skill, here is a way to think about your business, when the pandemic opens, better things will happen. It is actually not a bad idea to do it now. And I thought, well said. So that's where it started, on Zoom calls. We started training on Zoom calls.
I'm sorry for, I just might be a snob again, but people are able to get to Zoom and learn from Zoom on how to manage small business finance.
Yes, apparently women are very hungry to learn. That's what I got. I'm not saying everybody, every 100 of the women we train, but there are 10, 15, 20 women who definitely want to learn a thing. And this, we were training the master trainers. Now it gets even better because we're training the master trainers and the master on Zoom. The master trainers are training the users. So you can imagine the dilution. And yet we have users from there. She was there.
Outstanding. It's been last one for you.
Okay.
You've probably been 2-3 years in your journey, August 2020.
Yeah.
And I know you said you've not yet done a true pivot, but you've done some tweaks.
Yeah. What is
Tell me a little bit about your headwinds. I imagine it's completely bootstrapped now. You've raised money, you're bootstrapped. But outside of funding, tell me headwinds. This is a tech product, mass distributed through tiers of distribution to drive behavioral change, and then financial inclusion. Tell me a little bit about headwinds.
So we are bootstrapped because I was like, because I think we discussed it over lunch. Like, who do you get in, and you really need to get the right impact investors, because by now even I know that you go to a village and train 100 ladies, only maybe monetizable, what is called, will be 2-3 of them. So now if you enter a community, just train those 2-3 people who I can identify now. Why are we training 100 of them? And most investors will give it to you. Why are we bothering to train the other 98? But the point is, getting to rural areas is so expensive, and if you're there, you may as well do it. And mostly because we do not measure impact or success in terms of the 20 people who start. So we have a 20 to 25% retention kind of a thing, or people using it for over 2 months. That's how we measure it. But a whole bunch of them got to see an app that was built for them. So we build it in local languages. So it's Telugu, Marathi, Kannada, and Bengali, Assamese, right? That's meant for them. That pertains to them. There are very few things that are built exactly for them, which helps them manage the business that they are doing, and not something that they're simply consuming like a YouTube video. So it is actually something that they can move their fingers on and use. And that they get a sense of there is technology like this which is being built. And I will go as far as to say that even if they don't use Merables, but the next time they see a piece of technology, they're willing to try it out and not feel intimidated. It's a win. So yeah, sorry, I didn't answer your question, but that is a story I wanted to say. In terms of ISB, the Indian School of Business, we are partnering with them, or we are being incubated by D Labs. They have a stake. So they have a stake. Other than that, yes, bootstrap. The headwinds were, as we got to know later, that a lot of thought has to go into training, has to go into behavioral change. Coming to behavioral change, I've had ladies tell me, I don't really want to know how much money I'm making. So, which is fair, they don't. So, but why do you need to know? How is this going to help you? All those things become, we have to begin to answer them. So I keep trying to think of us as we are not a technology solution. We are a problem, like let's solve a problem in the social development space.
Thank you. Arjun, I'm going to take some of those thoughts to you because she dropped a weight and I'm so tempted to pick it up. IIT Bombay co-founder. So I just had to pick the bait up. On early stage product development, and you completely home developed a product with some sense of an end consumer in mind. Of course, because you and your team have been through the industry, you probably have a pulse. Tell me a little bit about the product development journey. This is hardware intensive, so it's classical CapEx. It's deep R&D. I imagine a lot of trial and error, very material science heavy. Tell me a little bit about the product journey.
So first of all, about why build this, if you look at other imaging modalities like X-ray and CT, the data is clear that there was an inflection point at which you had what we call the value segment, where you may have lower profit margins, but you have huge volumes coming in, kicking in, and improving accessibility to the modality. Not to mention, it's also a profitable way to go. This has not happened in MRI. And this is well acknowledged across by other industry leaders as well. So they also see this gap. So there was a clear gap there.
Okay.
But to solve that gap, you have to build something from ground up. It's not as straightforward as just remove some bells and whistles and sell again.
So you didn't sort of remodify an existing architecture, which I thought would be
no, absolutely not. Actually, initially we had imaging IP, which allowed you to do the physics related to the MR imaging process, which I felt could be licensed, and that could be a way to start. But there was no one biting, because you have no way to move forward in an industry which is virtually a controlled monopoly of 3 or 4 people. Unless you have a relationship with them, and frankly a quid pro quo of some sort with them, they are not going to look at your software. So if a good university is buying from them and is also developing some software that could go to them, they're happy to talk to them, because there's an obvious customer coming and saying, hey, look at something I've invented. So there is win-win there for them. But that wasn't the case with me.
I'm curious to ask him.
Yeah.
So sorry, but your first architecture worked.
Yeah. But when I say, it did work. Okay, that's the other thing I want to say for what it's worth, that when it's so capital intensive, most of the times you have just one shot to get it right. If you build one cryogenic magnet and you're spending 2 crores on it, you don't have the option of building 5 and doing trial and error. So it's as simple as that. Fully aware of it, go in and do it. It's okay. So far so good. That's
a unique perspective to handling an impact failure.
Maybe very foolish, but it will work so far. So but then So, okay, so to go back to that, nobody's biting, you need to do something with this IP. And then the thought came that maybe you need to build a platform. You don't want to build any Me Too platform, you need something unique there. And there are lots of issues with the existing platforms that exist out there. If you want to buy an MR scanner, also they'll evaluate you to check whether you're a good enough customer for a scanner, because there are many liabilities associated, cost models, etc. It's not that straightforward to even own and run an MR scanner, even if you have the initial capex. There are lots of problems. And it's a very sensitive device to install in the field and keep it running, etc. So if you solve some of those pain points and the result happens to be cost effective, then you have a winner. So the motivation was to solve a problem. And if that is also cost effective, then you have a potential business to build on. And so that was the driver behind product development, and then of course, software platform, many subsystems, etc. There's a plan to right now, I think, by value, there's 70% indigenization of new designs, and there is software IP granted across the world, but then there is hardware IP in the pipeline. There's some proprietary technologies. So yeah, it's all there, but the drivers are these points.
From what you told me earlier, you're just short of launching into market.
Yeah, the image quality looks fantastic. So if not, I mean, my original objective was build something that works, that's certified and generates great images. And so we are there now. The next step is to generate revenue and stuff. And
if you're comfortable sharing, you will self-distribute this. What's your route to market if you're comfortable sharing? I know you're pre-launch, so got to be cautious.
I mean, we are thinking through that, because at the moment we are saying no to people. The reason for that is you need to actually build a lot of serious capacity to supply even 20 MRI scanners into the marketplace. But if I had that capacity, tomorrow we could sell 50 and there are people to buy it. But then there is service sales. So I mean, the answer to that is I don't know at this point. We were discussing that in my whole idea was if somebody was the right channel partner or the right brand with whom we could partner to go into the market to do GTM, that would be the ideal way to go, because we'll then focus on our core strengths, which is technology, and also a sense of what would work, right? But that's somebody wanted to buy us instead of partnering with us. We didn't sell, so we continue to have offers, to partner. That's the discussion. The brand has to spit. It has to have some traction in the market. Thinking through that right now. Not in a rush, actually. There are enough problems to solve.
I'm going to take that thought to Wilma and Anand. Even while you guys were talking, you talked a lot about business model. Wilma, maybe I'll start with you. You started with a foundation, went to a social impact for profit. Your model itself involves working a lot with the government, especially with local governments. Help us understand a little bit of how you arrived at that business model. What did you try? What didn't work? What worked?
Yeah, so in the business model, actually, we don't work that much with government. We work with what we call bulk waste generators. So these are private generators of waste, which is large corporate campuses, large institutions, residences. And the idea is that actually 40% of any of our waste, our city's waste, comes from these generators. And the municipal solid waste rules actually says that that these bulk waste generators have to have their own private arrangements and reach out to service providers like us. So we have a captive market in the form of all of these generators, and they are our main customers. And our business model is revenues from sale of waste and revenues from a service fee. Now, this is where things are a little bit different, because today in India, people are not used to paying a service fee. And that's where we also have a problem with waste in the country, because people have other options. Dumping, burning is, of course, also there rampant. And why would you want to pay people a service fee when you can have these other so-called cheaper options when people are not thinking of health and the environment? So it is tough to actually reach out to all of these bulk waste generators to get. It takes us as much as sometimes 2 years, 3 years to acquire a single customer. So one end, you have definitely the bulk waste generators as our customers. on the other side, we do reach out to government, but at this point of time, the government as a customer is even more difficult for various different reasons, including the fact that the government, many of our municipal corporations still continue to use the dumping option. You know, in Bangalore, Mumbai, all of us know where the waste goes, it goes into dump sites. So if you're not recovering resources, you have that option currently of just collecting and dumping with severe repercussions. So unless this behavioral change takes place, both for any generator, whether it is government or whether it is residences and everybody else, we will be facing this situation. And that is the kind of business model that we have built, which has been slow, but we do believe that, you know, it is going to be there in the future.
Stick with you. You did talk about sort of the time it takes for you to convert a bulk waste generator. You would have had customers who churned, attrited, left. How do you deal with that? What's that journey like? Which means not all your attempts to convert a customer, not all of your revenue sources are necessarily bearing fruit.
Yeah, so the fact is that really demotivates teams. If you look at the business development team that has to go in and day out and try and convince customers to pay for a good waste management service. So here you have a very good product because you can track and trace your waste, and you know that all the waste that you are generating, 90% of it is accountable. There is processing taking place, there's recycling taking place. So the product is good. And the fact is that just for very small amounts of money, which is a service fee, people, even brands, you know, big multinational companies have systems which create so much of barriers. Yeah, you will have facility managers who say, look, I have people pay me for my waste. Why will I pay you a service fee? And then the next question is, okay, where does your waste go? How much of your waste is actually being recycled? So we know that, you know, there is waste which has better economic value, which is sometimes your carton boxes and your packaging waste, but that is just 10% of your waste. The large percentage of waste is what we see on our streets in terms of plastic packaging, etc., which can be recycled, but with less economic value. So it actually costs you more to collect it and recycle it. And, you know, and that's the reason why you need to have a service fee. So the problem really is for us to convert customers into paying customers. And that's where I mentioned about the informal sector. So the informal sector has been very useful to the system because they have done a lot of work with little or no more returns. And you've seen the fact that many of them don't know that very often they're actually putting in far more effort and not getting the kind of monetary benefits for what the effort that they have put in. Look at our scrap dealer. He comes to our houses and collects our paper waste, and he's doing such a good job. And here we are as middle class India saying, please pay us 8 rupees for that newspaper. And his business model is so weak. His wife and his child is in that system, and he's not counting the fact that they're doing good work. So that is the system which we have to deal with.
I'm going to take that to you. And a couple of things. One is, as you've gone through the journey, you had multiple trials, both on the product side and on the business side. At what point have you decided when I'm going through a traction and something is not going well, I double my investments, or I choose to pivot, or I choose to kill? Those are your 3 classical entrepreneurial options, right? And you would always attribute a reason for something that has not worked. Maybe I put more salespeople on it. My engineering hasn't worked, let me hire better technicians. How do you look at which path requires an investment pursuit and which part might require no, I think we've given it enough, it's time to withdraw and kill?
So I think it first starts off with an overall focus as an organization. And the reason I say this is the kind of businesses that we are in, when you think of a medical device business, there are significant overheads that start coming in, right? So we in Remediate try to look at it as years. The early years, the first 5 years was about product innovation. So everything was about product innovation. The next 5 years was about delivery innovation. It's now that we're getting to business model innovation, because I think it's difficult to try to do all three simultaneously, because the urge is always to do that. I always believe that it's better doing 20 things in 100 places rather than trying to do 100 things in 20 places. So that's how we first start off, by overall ensuring that there is alignment. The second part to it is to ask the question on when do you pivot versus when do you invest. So in product innovation, when you are not meeting a need of a customer fundamentally, then you would invest to be able to meet the need. For example, we were faced with a dilemma where we were using smartphones, and anyone who uses a smartphone would know that they are not infrared sensitive. Infrared light can't go through a smartphone camera. So we had to, however, take images without putting drops to dilate your eye, right? So how do you do that? So we came up with the technology. At that time, we had to make an investment, because Apple's not going to necessarily make a new camera for us, right? Or for that matter, any smartphone manufacturer. So that was an investment decision that was made, because we knew that it was the right thing to do during product innovation. When we came to the delivery innovation, at that point in time, let's say sales would have a problem. And this is classic in India, which is sales is never about value. Sales is always a pitch which is about cost in India. And that we had to completely reverse and change, right? Even today, I remember that there are anecdotes where doctors would say, there is the Chitratanal heart valves, right? And they would ask the patient, ye imported hai, ye local hai, kya chahiye aapko? Right? If that's the sales, right? Because at the end of the day, you have to recognize and go backwards. So we had to therefore bring in value-based selling, and then create a lot of what we're talking about, which is, if focused on capital, initially capital equipment based sales. We didn't get into the recurring revenue at that point in time, but we had to prove to the end user on how they would make money as a result of this, as is often the case. Now, to the last point, in terms of, let's say, the pivots. The pivots have always been the case where we've tried, and there was a time when you realize that the effort to reward is such that if you realize you're the only person that is able to do it in the company, then there's something seriously wrong, right? Because you know that it's not a scalable idea, for sure. So that's the thing. So I get into the field a lot only because if I have to ask the sales team why you're not able to do it, something's changed. It's very difficult to expect that the sales team is going to be able to give you those insights to help with the pivot. So you have to go in. So you do the work. So I do a lot of selling myself as much as do development. And that gives you the indications for pivot. For example, 2019, just before the pandemic, we said we have to start selling in the US, right? And here we possibly are around 3-4. I mean, at that time we had around $2.5 to $3 million that we had raised, right? And everything was in product and development out here. And to start a company in the US, you're not going to have that. But we said, okay, we need only 3 or 4 people. Let's get started. And in 3 years, we were able to sell double the number of devices that we were selling here. So it was a good pivot. It could have also gone wrong. But we take that pivot decision when we know that you have to go to an easier solution, because the tendency is always for us to create, especially if we are all creative people, we'll try to think of a creative way by which you can solve the problem. But it's always back to simplicity is what I believe. And that simplicity helps you pivot. And that's how we look for the pivoting decisions that you talked about.
I'll stick with you, but I want to pick with something that Wilma said. I wrote that down. The teams get demotivated. And you've got this diverse distribution model. And like you said, you want to go, you've given it 3 phases of evolution. What does it take for an organization or your organization to have that resilience? Willingness to go through a customer who didn't buy, a price point that didn't work, a product that didn't work, or as you said, a Superman engineer, but you don't want to back him because he seems to be the only engineer being able to do it.
So I think first up, you've got to look at data, right? It has to be decisions as well as have ways by which you can motivate on the basis of what the data speaks, right? Sometimes I always believe that it is about people, product, or process. It eventually comes down to these 3. So if it's about people, for example, we've had a live example where sold very well in India, then moved into recurring models, was really not working out for that sales manager. Then we pivoted and had that person go to the US and did exceptionally well because of the fact that he could take what he was learning here and he realized he was solving a problem that the others were not solving there. So at the end of the day, I think some of it could be specific to people. If it's at an organizational level, then it's far more difficult, right? At which point pivot is the only way. I can't see any other way by which you would get out of it. So in this case, motivation always is about coming back to purpose. And purpose for me personally has helped a lot because we have sort of taken on a problem where you are building new devices, you're creating a new market for it. And by the way, you're also creating a new business model for it, which is like trying to take on what 3 or 4 companies would. So going back to the purpose of why you're doing is always very important because that's the highest motivator. Secondly, you have to be transparent. When something is wrong, everyone from the top to the bottom needs to know something is wrong and if something has gone wrong. So I think that's the second way by which the motivation remains, where you're openly able to accept failure and you celebrate those failures. So we do have awards where you celebrate the failures, either okay, it does not work, it did not work, but here's what we spent. So some of those, even if it doesn't motivate, it at least gives them a sense that the one who's performed well is part of the journey. But at the same time, the more difficult decisions is when you have to take decisions where it's not about motivation alone, but just that the person may be not the right person for the right job at that point in time. Those are more in terms of what you would have one-on-one to be able to make those decisions and transitions. But otherwise, I think all of these are the same as what anyone else would do in their companies. The only learning for us has been that you can move around either geographically or across products or across centers within India itself. So those are
the number of variables you deal with.
So you reduce the number of variables. Always I feel that you reduce the number of variables, the solution will automatically come.
Arjun, what do you had a very different kind of org that you built. How have you built your org to be resilient enough for your product journeys? And like you said, I'm going to spend 2 crores on a cryo cell and I only one shot at it. I'm sure you told that message to your team, dude, you got only one shot at it.
No, I told them they have 2 shots, but I had only 1 shot. Thing is, when I started off, my deal was very clear that I was a technology guy, I will build something. And I had zero idea of how to raise money. And I did not know the building blocks of a company. But then after about a year and a half, once we started getting our first images from the prototype, etc., I realized that most of the people joining this effort were joining because of me. So there was automatically a responsibility on me. And at that point, funding was also an issue. And so I cannot go and tell them that, look, I never thought about it, right? So it turned out that the organization started getting built organically at that point because I had to take responsibility and start thinking through that. The risky part there is that I'm learning on the job, which is not, not the best way to go about it. Personally, at least it was stressful, but I got a few things right in the sense that some building blocks like, very basic stuff, which small companies don't get right, get a good lawyer, get a good company. I got all that right because it just made sense. And then I got all the functional parts also right and pretty early. So that helped put together a good company. Now, as far as your point was on resilience, right?
Which is for your team, for your org, for your customers, for your donors, for sure.
Yeah. So the first thing was that the 4 or 5 people who came together were highly motivated to build this. And so we could see that it is succeeding. We could see every step, despite hurdles, that we were making progress. So that kept people going. And the other part was on resilience is when COVID, etc. happened, we're not sitting and waiting for what next, but I was taking proactive steps to keep the organization going. And that was visible to them. And of course, I gave them clear assurances that if you're in real trouble, I'll let you know 6 months in advance. So don't worry about it. Which they trusted me because, of course, you have to be transparent and open because you should be that way anyway in life, never mind a company. So they knew that. So it was fine. It worked really well in terms of their trusting me. And eventually, 1 or 2 people left and came back because they realized that the work environment and the way we were functioning was also very supportive despite the challenges. And so that gave others confidence that they should continue in the organization. So that's how it's happened. There's no strategy or plan to it. It was what I felt was the right thing to do at that point to move forward. And so far, so good. Yeah.
I have a question for all of you, but I'll stick with you. By the way, the last thing you said is very interesting. We had that conversation in the morning sessions as well. Crossing the river by identifying the stones on the way. Right? Yeah. You feel the stones with your feet and then you cross the river.
Yeah. I mean, I'll add like 1 or 2 employees would ask, what's your vision for 5 years? I have no vision for 5 years, right? It's the stupidest question ever, right? I have 6 months. I have so many things to do.
My team just one strike or
that fellow is asking, he'll say something, but the others no. Okay, that was a good way to manage that. Because I have a list of 50, 60 things to do in 8 to 12 months. I won't think beyond that. And I know if you get that done, the path will be clear to do a lot more. So I just see it as pointless. So feeling the stones is a good way to go in my view.
Last question for all of you, but I'll stay with you. How have you prepared yourself for this?
For this journey?
There is a degree of personal strength. When you're saying my vision is, I'll feel the stones because I have a sense of an end state. I don't know how to get there, which means you have to prepare yourself for it. And then you take off from the energy and the stress of your teams.
So because I was not prepared to do the job that I'm doing today, it was at that moment, whatever challenge came, I faced the stress that was there because one thing I wasn't going to do, and it was quit. I was not going to do that. So once you know that, then it is what it is. And I was pretty at any point the company could also die, but I had regrets over that after some point. So it was okay with me. But what I did every step, including when the funding is over, etc., happened is no matter how small it was, I tried. Even with Zoho, my father's friend was just visiting him and his son-in-law said, oh, Sridhar is interested in MR scanners. And I tried and I reached out to him and we got $5 million in 30 days. But the probability of that working out was next to nothing, right? But that one thing I could do, a few emails and a few phone calls is not going to hurt me. So I didn't quit. Other than that, whatever you have to face, it is what it is. You face it.
Wilma, the same thing for you. How do you prepare? How have you prepared yourself for the sine curve of the journey? You're a journalist turned impact entrepreneur.
So it was just one day at a time. But then there's also that, every little positive thing that happened, every little milestone that you hit just becomes that energy that you get from that sustains you for all the difficulties that go along the way. Yeah. So it's just that there is a certain commitment. You start with that commitment and then you stay with what you believe that you must do on a day-to-day basis. And that's also something that we translate and we kind of talk to our teams about. And in each of our teams that are there, at least in our team, we see, the difficulties that they face, especially when they come in as young professionals, believing that here we are to make change happen. And that change is something which sometimes is even not visible. And yet, they do stay with the fact that there is a commitment. So it's just day to day that works.
Anand, yours.
I would say it's about being in the trenches, but also knowing when to let go. Let go, not in the sense of the company, but let go of saying that someone else will figure it out. Because you always think that you're the hero that's going to figure it out. It's never going to happen. You can't grow as a company if it's that way. So the resilience gets built into the system. If you know, one of the philosophies we use is throw someone in the water, they'll figure to swim. Just before they drown, pull them up. Right? Because then to a large extent, you allow for the self-learning to happen, but you're there in case, let's say, for some reason, it's too much, right? So that's how at least we look at building resilience, which is compared to the amount of time I would spend with the teams to right now, where it is more strategy and more trying to do beyond of what it is. So that's one way by which I've seen systems getting built to have resilience, right? And for me, what I feel proud of is an optical engineer who's a carpenter's son, right? But who today has been responsible for a lot of our patterns that we have, right? And that resilience of failures comes not as a result of anything that I may have done, but more as a result of the system allowing for that learning to happen. Eventually, I think if that's in place, resilience happens for sure.
Yeah, your sources of strength. You still bike?
I don't get a chance as much. But I did want to add to what he said, and not add, I just thought it was so nice that he said that. that he knew he had one chance, but he told the team, you have two. And that's true. You protect the team as far as you can. So, I know that times our partners are terribly disappointed with some of our stuff, and I know where the email that went out wrong or whatever, but it's always like, no, it's all manageable. Don't worry about it, kind of a thing, because you really don't, you want to allow people to be comfortable in the company.
That's your sense of leadership.
Yeah. And the thing that, so everybody has to train, everybody has to talk to the user, everybody has to write a proposal, everybody has to write a report, good, bad, or ugly, so that you get a sense of what else is happening, just so that we build that understanding of what everybody else is doing. So there is transparency.
But you still haven't answered me. What keeps you going? That's what you do to keep your team going. What keeps you going?
Yeah, it's the idea that you don't quit. Like, you just try something else tomorrow. Sorry, it's... Huh? Yeah, I can say that number of people who told me when we told them that we are going to Vietnam with a bike, and it was like, isn't there an ocean in between? So now I've stopped worrying about what people say. I think it's okay.
Lovely segue to open to all of you. We've got about 15 minutes. Please put your hands up and I'll call on you guys. There is a table mic if you want to use that. So we'll start with you.
From my point is that all of you, because you all are very I can stand also. Yeah, you all are very high level entrepreneurs and and very good experience. You might have mobilized crores of rupees for these enterprising activities, but I am thinking about my people, where I'm working for the tribal people, because they are struggling for their enterprising activities. We have tried our level best. The women group has to come forward for their marketing of their NTP products and value addition. And but still, in most of the cases, after some stage, due to the marketing challenges, they are become failure. So, what is your view actually about this thing? Actually, how? Because I got the message that once you fix the mission, then you should stick up with the mission. Then you can achieve the goal actually. But I know it's for maybe like people like you, it's a very thing. Sometimes we motivating to the grassroots tribal people, and they are not habituated with this type of entrepreneurship activities. They have their traditional enterprising activities, but not like this. Outside marketing activity.
Yeah, maybe that's
so in that case, how we can strengthening their vision and mission and inspiring themselves to come forward. So
thank you.
Anyone? Thank you.
Yeah, might be a little contrary, but what you are speaking of and what I have seen in the rural areas, some of it is livelihood activity. It is not necessarily entrepreneurship. We call it all entrepreneurship activities, but it is livelihood activities. So that is very different from necessarily taking a new product to market and so on. And that is always hard. I mean, you probably know even 90% of people like us fail. So that is a given, even in the rural areas, or, if you're doing a new, trying out a new thing, then yes, there's a chances of failure there. Motivating honestly at all levels is difficult. Even with your 100 women who are working in Kalahandi on artisanal products, there'll be 5, 10, 15 who really want to, take it forward. You cannot expect 100 of them to take it forward. I think we need to set our expectations. We can build a business plan for them. We can even get them some 20,000 rupee grant and do all those things. But there will be, like in every group, every population, there will be that 10, 15, 20% who will be highly motivated. The rest, another 40% we will try to motivate, and some will simply do livelihood activities. I don't know if I answer your question, but at least that's the perspective.
Other questions? Shoot.
Thank you. My name is Fodi Suma from Freetown, Sierra Leone. I'm a hustler, I call an entrepreneur, but I'm creating. We saw an opportunity for renewable energy in Sierra Leone, and we got involved in that. What I wanted to find out from these great entrepreneurs out there is, I haven't heard much about their partners, but particularly involvement in their stories. And for me as an entrepreneur, I started with my wife. So I just wanted to see what part that plays in the ecosystem, in the entrepreneurship, because I see some of them are taking shorter to get to some goal, and maybe I'm taking longer. I just wanted to understand what partners role play in this entrepreneurship.
Personal partners or business
A
partners?
wife, particularly, a husband, relations partners. Yes.
Okay, very different source.
Wives or husbands, yes.
Arjun's jumped on your question.
Yes.
I have been accused many times of not giving enough credit to my wife. So when I spoke about the Singapore phase and the grant I got, it was a $200,000 grant. That money was fronted by my wife. So even today she can make a lot of money, but she's sitting at home because she's tired of me and the kids. So also, it's not, when you speak of resilience through all those phases, you are going home and not always happy. And so she has to put up with that. So it's really hard on the family. However, the really good thing about her in my case was she was also not going to quit. And so she said, more because I would have been a miserable person had that ended. So I would say that it's an intangible role, invaluable role in my place, and it's difficult to quantify. But it's a huge role nevertheless. And it happens the other way around also. So yeah.
So I think to a large extent, it comes in two ways, right? I believe it's very easy for an entrepreneur to believe, I mean, using the right words, to believe in your own bullshit. That always happens. You need someone that is there who's very objective and to tell you that, no, what you're doing is wrong, or what the way you're thinking about it is wrong, is not right. And that can really come from partners. Be it an idea, be it in terms of a strategy, be it in terms of anything that you'd want to do at a deeply personal level. So it's about how open you are to be able to seek that help. And if you're open, that's a huge source of alternative thinking and strength that you get, especially when partners are able to do that. And that is something that I personally have had as an experience as well.
Other questions? Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Hi, my name is John. I worked with the SELCO Foundation for a few years, and now back in India after some time in the UK, where I'm from. My question was around funding, particularly, and linking to the comment about donut economics that Wilma introduced. So how do you define impact as your business, and has funding forced you to go a different line that you wanted to? I think also, Dr. Anand, you mentioned about selling to the US. Maybe that was a funding, trying to pay back some of the funding you were getting. Maybe that was the reason, I'm not sure. But any thoughts around that? Thank you.
I'd like to add to that. I think, how do you, and we spoke about it earlier, mission-led versus driven by either a donor or an investor, and there's some conflict to be managed there.
Yeah, so I would say that we've been very conservative in having to go out for equity-based investment, simply because we are in a business model which is, which requires a little sensitivity, and we are looking to solve a problem on both the environment, ecological, as well as on the social front. So it is, and waste is a critical problem, and there is a lot of technologies out there, where investors are willing to invest, provided that there is that quick return. So technologies are not going to solve the problem because it's not going to have resource recovery take place. So we are very conservative in who we go to in terms of acquiring any funding. Now, we've been very clear that the best way to is to actually have a business model where you will need limited funding. And that is the route that we have decided to take. And that's why we've gone for very limited investment funding that has come in, made sure that there is a good control with the funding team, and so from that aspect, really made sure that the threats are not there, because a lot of companies wanting to come in because India is solving this big problem, and they can easily solve it through technology. That's been our response to that.
I can sort of give two perspectives. Perspective one is the very first startup that I was an early employee in when I came back from MIT to Bangalore. There we had taken pretty aggressive investors, right? It was a product that was pre-Theranos days, but something that could do in HIV/AIDS diagnostics. 60% of the tests done in the lab being done in a doctor's office, right? And at that point in time, we were under the pressure, and there was an exit that the company needed to have, and the technology got sold to Beckman Coulter. And there wasn't a time for doing the delivery innovation and all that. That was very close, right? So when I started Remedios, therefore, it was very important to choose the right kind of funding or type of funding, depending upon the stage of the company. So very early, we were funded by the Wellcome Trust. So the Wellcome Trust it was not grant money. We basically gave a certain percentage of the net income, right? So it held us accountable to that. And then after that, once we got the product market fit, right? At that time, I really think it is good to have some kind of financial investors, because they don't kick you on the backside to ensure that you do your job of being able to do the scale. So I think at that phase, a financial investor is good to have, because it allows you to be able to think about the problem from a business perspective, even as the intent is impact. Thirdly, when to your question in terms of whether our move to the US was fueled by, no, it was primarily because we would not have survived at that time if we had not, right? And there was a larger purpose for me, which is I wanted to validate the fundamental hypothesis that products designed keeping in mind the constraints of a developing nation context will have value in the developed nation as well. So we were very clear we are going there, because there is a market there, and it is just about us being able to ask how much of a focus versus defocus it is. So it was not investor driven per se. That being said, right now we are at a phase where we are not looking for financial investors. We are moving more into strategic investors, right? Because right now for us, it's about reach. For us, it is because we've got the product market fit, we've got the business model and the delivery ecosystem. So right now it's about the strategic investors who are able to give us the strength of volume and spread that we need. So I always believe that the maturity or what you're doing at that point in time drives the kind of investor that you need. And yes, it's always the case where there should be those that believe in the purpose, etc. So it's always true. But I'm going to be also honest in saying that it's not like impact investors don't look for ROI, right? Everyone does look for return on investment. That's important to keep in mind, which is also the reason why, as Anand said, there was the transformation of a PhD to business economics in my journey as well, because it is important. It is important to make that transition, not because of the fact that you're losing focus on your mission, but because you can do your mission better by knowing your numbers better. That's how I view it.
Ma'am, you had a question.
Hi, everybody. I'm Divya. So something common that I see with all of the speakers here is the need for behavior change. So my question to you is, can you give me an example of some aspect of behavior that you wanted to change in your community? So I worked in Rangde previously, and if you know, we have a financial literacy module there as well, where we do financial literacy for extremely poor and rural farmers, artisans, entrepreneurs online, right? So something that we struggled with was that there were so many different behavior changes that we needed to make for even something as small as opening a bank account, right? So in all of the things that you've spoken about, how did you approach behavior change? How did you select that X, Y, Z are the behaviors that will take priority? How did you measure the effect of that behavior change? Thank you.
Yeah, I'll be very brief about this, because that is finally all our business models. We talk of ecosystems, etc., and we need behavior change to take place. I'll tell you that for us, the biggest challenge is to get big brands to kind of put design at the top of everything else when they're bringing out a product, so that we will have less waste. And on the other spectrum, to have consumers become conscious consumers by consuming less. So those are the kind of changes that we have as an expectation, and we just have to go out there, constantly talk about it, and perhaps, use forums like this to trigger people's thinking in directions that, we're all meant to take now in the kind of age that we are in. Yeah. So,
I mean, first up, what I always feel is when you get into behavior change, etc., we first is about realizing that there are some other people out there that may not be in your company who actually may have solved for it or optimized for it. So I always believe in going out and seeking help in those cases. So I'll give you two very tangible examples of it. Example number one was, as I said, someone we could very clearly see needed immediate access to a specialist, but was able to see very well and therefore said, why do I need to access, right? So we had learned from, this was at Dr. Mohan's Diabetes Center in Chennai, where we just brought in one change. We gave them a coupon at the time of testing saying that if in the next 15 days you go, you get a 20% discount. When behavior change came about. But we did a control C, control B, learning from somebody else. Similarly, we had a case where in case of glaucoma, which is even more difficult because it sets in early, but then you don't realize it until there's visual changes. Arvind Eye Care had a beautiful model, which is very contrarian. So what they do these days is they would actually have all of the 5 who actually have changes. They would do a consultation together. So patient privacy out of the window, extra, they get all 5 together. One converts, the other talks about it, right? That was. The third was, we realized that when it comes to changing behavior, one is your pure science way of changing it, right? Where you show them what would happen to the eye, etc. Right? Now that worked very well for us in the West. In India, emotional counseling works. For example, we would have Arvind again showed us where an emotional counseling where you tell the person that he or she will not see their grandchildren. Right? So at the end of the day, it is very important that first up, the realization for me personally was there are many who are directly interacting with patients who have solutions for these. And as a product company, I needed to access that ecosystem to solve some of these problems that we were facing. So those are the ways we see. But again, at the end of the day, it comes down to simplifying. When you see 10, right, we always want to think of all those 10. Reduce that 10. We try to use a framework called CBA, Constraints Brainstorm Map. Reduce the constrain your problem. If you don't constrain your problem, you think of each and every one. So we try to reduce that 10 to 1 or 2. Bring it to 1 or 2, then you would immediately have, and then it's a data-driven thing of whether it works or not. But those are some of what has helped us so far in what we're doing.
We probably have time for a last one. Shoot.
Yeah, I had a question. Anand, you'd mentioned IIT, PhD and all several times. But yeah, I was just curious to know how much of those qualifications really mattered, and also linking it to this gentleman from Karnataka's question who really felt that, he's not equipped enough. Do qualifications really matter? What do you really need to be an entrepreneur? Like, what really held you during like the toughest times, being an entrepreneur? Yeah.
This is probably for all of you. What held you to your toughest times? Was it your degrees? She asked, not.
I think her question was it.
Yeah.
No, not really, right? In fact, it worked the opposite in my way. I'm not an optical engineer by training. What I did at MIT was very different from what I came here to do, right? So you always feel that you're possibly, if you talk about your degrees, it's actually bad because it's not relevant at all. Point number one, at least within the company, because everyone, what does chemical engineering have to do with what you're doing right now? So this is not what it is. But what actually gives you the strength is connecting the dots. I think the exposure to some extent, at least personally for me, has helped connect the dots in some cases. Like I can give you an example. I'm not sure if many people know Ants, which is a store in Indiranagar, right? Many years back when that was starting off, artisans in Bongaigaon, right? So at that point in time, we were there in Bongaigaon trying to figure out, and we realized that they were very good, but they needed the fashion technology and the design language, if you will, right? So to a large extent, I think the connecting of dots is one thing, meaning the network effect is one thing that I can say more than the degrees. The exposure at least allows us to access a network. And I always believe that that is not related to degrees. It relates to how you are as a person. How much are you willing to seek help from outside? At least personally for me, that's been what has helped me a lot personally.
If you want to.
Yeah, I just echo on that because
can
finally, yeah, you can, and you seek help as and when you see the own gaps that you have, and there's enough of availability of whatever information, etc., for which you can get help from.
It's not about the degree, although the degree does open doors sometimes, but I think at least in my case, domain expertise is very important. You need to have domain expertise, whether that's accompanied with a degree or not. So that's no substitute for that.
So honestly, you can use a degree in the other way, right? Like in the sense, I'm not even from IIT, or I am. If I'm doing it, I have nothing to. There's no stake. Yeah, it doesn't matter. In fact, nobody can hold you to anything. Fail to fail.
No. Other things learn especially well. There's a lot of unlearning that I personally had to do coming back to India and doing it, because your first sense is, "Arey, wahan pe aisa hota hai." You have to unlearn that. You have to figure out an ecosystem, grow an ecosystem, figure things. Like in our case, making a lens, right, which is a complex lens. That ecosystem is completely got to figure it. So I think for me, I think the real value in India is here to young entrepreneurial employees. I think that's.
Who want to stay in the town that we are in, right? Who don't
That is
want
one who come with an attitude of ready to fail, or they are ready to sort of figure it out. Right? And I think that's the real decision. Life skills of what life teaches you, especially when it's hard.
So I'll just add that we have a lot of those skilled employees and they are fantastic at what they do, but they are able to be productive because there is domain expertise. And if that comes with a degree, fine. If it doesn't, fine, but you need domain expertise. And if that means to go get a degree, it's fine. So, I mean, it's important to have domain expertise. And if that means you have to go get a PhD, go get it. It's fine.
Thank you so much. It's been a fascinating hour and a half, if you would believe that. I've completely enjoyed this discussion. I hope all of you and the people online have. Thank you so much. It's been a pleasure.
Hi. Thank you so much, all our speakers. I think all of us learned a lot, and we just have some gifts for you we'd like to give. Moving on to the next session, we have a fireside chat planned between. Go ahead. So, as long as I have your attention, our next session is from 5 p.m. at the auditorium. It's a fireside chat between Nitin Kamat, the founder of Zerodha, and Mr. Satish Shodhia, CEO of Pain Matter Foundation, followed by an interesting fake story by Sandeep Rao. Can we have you at the auditorium at 5 p.m., please? Proceed to your coffee break. Thank you.
Yes.
Something else is happening. I'm so confused. Why am I again sitting in the system stories?
request everyone to please be seated.
Hello. 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 Can we have everybody seated and ready for the next session, please? Welcome back, everyone. I hope everybody is seated. We hope you're having an interesting day with a lot of reflections and cross-learnings with each other. To keep up with the momentum, our next session is a fireside chat between Mr. Nitin Kamath, founder of Zerodha, and Mr. Sameer Sishodia, CEO of Rainmatter Foundation. This session will be moderated by Mr. Sandeep Singh, resident editor at the Indian Express. Can we please have you on stage?
So good evening, everyone. Today we have with us a person who needs no introduction, one of the most successful entrepreneurs in the country, and founder and CEO of Zerodha. He's been a great disruptor, a huge disruptor in this country, making it easier for everyone across the country to come and invest in the markets, to participate in India's growth story and create wealth. And that has led to significant changes. I mean, if you see the demat accounts in the country, in the last 2 years from 4 crore to 10.5 crores now. Retail investors are the backbone of Indian markets now, even though FPI is pull out, they stand behind. So we will talk about his, we also have with us Sameer Sishodia, who's heading the foundation, the Rainmatter Foundation, which is backed by Zerodha. So we'll talk about Sameer's, about Nitin's path, and but the failure behind his success. First, we'll like touch that. He's been an immensely successful entrepreneur. So if I may ask you, Nitin, Zerodha is hugely successful, but over the path, when you founded it and when you progressed on it, and now at the stage that it is, can you talk to us about the failures that you had, something that you really wanted to do that you couldn't do, and if you can touch upon that.
Yeah, no, thanks for having me here. So I don't know why I'm here, by the way. So I have more questions and answers about some of these things. But yeah, about business, I think I had most of my failures, thankfully, before Zerodha. I started trading the markets and becoming a sub-broker, doing portfolio advisory. So I'd done 10, 12 years, I think 12 years went into building a career around the stock markets. Zerodha only started in 2010. So all my, like I keep wondering when like this whole roller coaster called life, right? As in, I've seen a lot of downs and ups before, but generally the last 4-5 years have been like a trending up. So I keep, we keep talking about it in the office. When is the next like the down move in the roller coaster? So, so the learnings from before. See, I think like, a lot of people who are building businesses or wanting to build business, when they come ask me and they ask me, Nitin, what is the reason for the business has done well? One is, we've been extremely lucky. We were at right place, right time so many times. But more importantly, also, I think, I ended up trying to build a business around my core competencies, right? And I keep saying this, like you need to kind of sharpen your axe before you go chop wood, right? So, and I didn't plan for it. It was accidental. So because I think, ended up building a business around some core competencies, the odds of luck hitting you increased significantly, right? And building a business, is like growing a forest. It takes a long time. So like this is something. Every time we meet, someone who, like any scientist type. My question usually is there a way to quickly grow a forest? Like is there a way money can solve for the problem, right? And there isn't. There is no quick way to do this. And business is also like that. It takes a lot of time and effort and a lot of luck to kind of everything to come together. And but generally, the experience. I think the biggest takeaway from my life, when I look back, is that I got lucky maybe because I ended up doing business around something that I love to do.
So you said you started out as an investor. Now you provide a platform to all the investors. Were you yourself a successful investor?
Yeah. I mean, so the way Zerodha, we get credited, Zerodha gets credited quite a bit for building a bootstrap business. So we haven't raised any external capital. And the reason was because when we started the business, the money was really funded by our profits from before. So, like my dad was a bank manager. So it's not like we came from wealth or something like that. So we had done well between 2005 to 2010. We used that seed kind of money as a seed capital to start a business. And in 2011-12, the first 1-2 years of the business, Nikhil, my younger brother. So what happened was when he started the business, the plan was that I go and give a shot at building a better broker. And my younger brother continues trading. And if I'm not able to do my job well, I'll get back to trading again. That was really the backup plan. And so that's really how Zerodha started. And the first 1-2 years of the business was funded by Nikhil's trading profits. Like, he was at the back end, investing in trading. And that's how we could remain bootstrapped the first 1-2 years. But that said, your question, I kind of can understand what you're kind of hinting at, which is very few people, trade, invest in the markets and make money. And that's
so that's what. So did you make money there?
Yeah, absolutely.
Did you aspire to become a Rakesh Jhunjhunwala?
So the thing is, at some point, I realized that Nikhil, my younger brother, is a better trader than I am, right? So, and it didn't make sense for both of us to sit and trade. And so the plan was he continues trading because he's more skilled than I am in terms of trading. And I even before Zerodha, right, from early 2000, I was into this building communities of sorts. I had the biggest Yahoo Messenger group in India on stock markets. Then Orkut started. I had the biggest Orkut community. So I had this whole, almost like this love to share capital market knowledge without any expectation. It was not like, there was any monetization angle to it. And it was just you used to write your blog because you like blogging, so, and not really that, someone's going to like, share and things like that, So I think I personally was more inclined towards, I think, building a broking business, and Nikhil continued trading. So Nikhil has gone ahead and started a hedge fund. So today, it's called True Beacon. And so he took that, maybe the Rakesh Jhunjhunwala path, and I took the, but we work together, So it's just that as brothers, it's very important that we demarcate our territories, and we don't get into, like trying to do what each other does. So I stopped trading once Zerodha started, and Nikhil does only trading.
So, but does it still rub on somewhere that you were not you didn't succeed that well?
See, the thing is, okay, so about trading, right? I think a lot of people mistake trading to trading stocks, right? Trading is, I think, trading your time and effort where you got the best rewards on your time and effort, right? Trading, it could be trading stocks. If you're good at trading stocks, you trade stocks. If you're good at singing, you go sing. If you're good at building a broking business, you go build broking business. So, when someone asks me, Nitin, how does it feel not trading? I say, Zerodha is my biggest trade of my life, right? Because, I'm really putting my time, effort, sweat, blood, everything into this. So I think trading isn't, this is something that I keep trying to explain to everyone, that trading isn't trading stocks, The only thing, the reason I think people get enticed to trading stocks is because it's very easy to trade stocks. You can open an account in like 2 minutes and you can put money in it in 5 minutes and then you can start trading. The only easy thing about trading is opening a trading account and nothing else.
Right. What is it still that you think you have not been able to, say, achieve? Something that you regret or something that you aspire to achieve?
So when we started the business, we were very active traders. We were trying to solve the problem that, active traders need a platform with low cost and where the platform is transparent. Then it became about, we need to educate people. So we started Varsity, which is probably one of the largest education initiatives on capital markets in the world. Then it became about platforms. So, we need to offer better products and tools and utilities so customers can do better. And then, we said, not everything we can do ourselves, so we need to, collaborate and, maybe find ways to enable other people to build platforms. So Rainmatter FinTech started, which is our incubator. But then, there's a question we've been asking over the last 2-3 years that, we've done very well as a business, but what do we really exist for today, right? And the answer is that, I think we need to be around because our customers should be able to do better with their money just because we exist, right? And if we are not able to do it, there's not even a point of us existing, right? And that is really a very complex problem to solve, which is how do you help people do better with their money, right? Because everyone's influenced by their fear, their greed, their biases, and their different biases. So yeah, it's a tough problem. I had thought for a long time that education and good platforms will help it. But after 6-7 years of doing it, I've realized it's not. I think good platforms and education isn't enough for people to do better with their money. And that's really the problem that we are trying to solve for over the last 1, 2, 3 years. I think one hope has been for us is we've launched this platform called Nudge, which is like a user experience layer on top of trading app. Think of it, I'll give you an example. Say a person who's making $1,000 a month of salary is trying to buy a 5,000 rupees phone on Amazon, right? What would Amazon do, right? As in, if you don't have the money, they'll say, borrow money from me and take the phone. But it's not a right sale, right? Because a guy who earns $1,000 a month shouldn't be buying a $5,000 phone because it's not right for him financially. Can Amazon nudge the customer and nudge that person and say, dude, you should not be buying this. What are you smoking? Go buy a $1,000 phone or $500 phone, right? As in, right? Can we do that is a question, and that's something that we are attempting as a business, right?
That is where I wanted to come in, because you provide the platform where a lot of youngsters are coming and investing, and especially taking the options and derivatives routes. Yeah. So we have seen numerous examples where they have even lost money, especially over the last 2 years when the markets were rising, people were taking all kinds of bets. Now, while you provide the platform, you have lowered the entry barrier for anybody and everybody to come and enter and invest. How do you safeguard there when people come?
I get it. Yeah. So the thing is, I think one of the qualms over the last 2-3 years has been is this whole rise of the influencer and the rise of setting wrong expectations out there. This whole setting expectation that you can somehow make quick, easy money from the stock markets, which is absolutely bullshit. There is no quick, easy money to be made in the stock markets. It's probably the hardest place in the world to make easy money. So and that expectation. Once the problem is when someone enters the market with the wrong expectation, all his decisions are gonna be based on that. Right? If you come with the expectation that you can make 100% return on a year, all your trades will be wanting to get 100% return, which means you're gonna take more risk. You will trade more speculatively and all of that, right? But if people come to the markets with the right expectations, it's the chance of the person doing well with the money also increases. And this is something that we have constantly tried, even with the Nudge platform. The first nudge that we introduced was this penny stock nudge, right? Because a lot of first timers think a stock at 5 rupees is cheaper than a stock at 500 rupees, right? Which is absolutely wrong, right? As in, a value of a stock is based on the underlying asset, right? So what we did is that, today when you go on Kite, our trading app, and you try to buy a penny stock, we kind of scare the shit out of the customer saying, dude, what are you doing? What is, do you even know this stock company doesn't exist? Now, it is not paternalistic, right? In the sense, we don't disallow a guy from taking the trade because, that's not our job, right? But we are doing a business of saying, alerting him, saying, this is a penny stock. Do you even at least know this? And our penny stock trading volumes are down 70%, from the time we introduced this nudge. Now coming to futures and options, these are leveraged trades, right? And like you rightly said, if people don't trade it well, the consequences are not that great. And that's one of the reasons why we have constantly gone out there and set the expectation. And I don't know how many times I've publicly said less than 1% of our customers make more than fixed deposit returns. People who trade, speculatively, trading futures and options, etc. The idea being, you set the expectations right, then people come to the business for the right reasons. A lot of people ask me, dude, why would you do it as a broker? Because you will lose business, right? But I will lose business if you think about it in a quarter-on-quarter context. I rather make 100 rupees from a customer over 20 years than make 2,000 rupees in 1 month, right? But the problem, I think, in the industry or in the capitalistic world is everyone's working quarter-on-quarter targets, right? So everyone will do what is right for the quarter. The decision-making framework is like that, right? As in, I need to get to my quarterly goals, if whatever it takes. And then you kind of, when you optimize for what is right for the short term, it's usually not right for the long term. And today as Zerodha, I think we have the freedom to not think short term and think long term because we don't have investors. There is no revenue target. There is no growth target. So we are consciously trying hard, but I think, I don't know. I mean, if you were to ask me, have we done a good job at it? Maybe not. I mean, there is still a lot to do here. And until now, we've taken a stance that we are a platform. We don't care what happens. But over the last 1-2 years, we have said that your moral. I mean, you have an obligation to the customer. You cannot just kind of say that I don't care what the customer does. So this is something that we've been working on, and every single thing that we are building as a business over the last 2 years is with this objective saying we need to help people do better with the money.
And is this something that is that you see within the industry, your peers, and is the thought process there, or are you taking the lead in that?
No, I mean, see, the thing is, all my peers, right? Either there are paid CEOs, right, or there are founders who have, probably hold 5-10% stake in the business. They cannot take this stance. They're not in a position to take this stance because, if you're a CEO, if you don't perform well for the next 2 quarters, he's going to lose his job. No one's going to ask, dude, what your decision's going to work out in the next 5-10 years or not, right? So similarly, if you're, if you're someone who diluted a lot of capital, you've raised, so you've raised money, and you've raised money selling a certain story of growth and etc. So you cannot suddenly tomorrow say, what, I don't think this is right. But one of the things, Samir and I keep talking about this, is that today, because of the success of the business, I think I'm in a position to peer pressure people into doing some things, right? In the sense, if I come and say this very openly, I'm sure, if it's recorded, put out there, some of my competitors will listen to it. Now, can they, somehow not think about some of these things that I'm saying, so I think we can peer pressure, I think we were one of the first companies to do a ESOP buyback, and then we did it, and then there were like 30 other companies who did it, right? So like that, I think today, we have a influence on others, and one of the objectives of the Rainmatter Foundation also is that eventually, people will start asking questions, if Zerodha is doing this, why are you not doing this? So, I mean, that is one of the, agendas of doing this as well.
So I'll get Samir in as well. I'm sorry, I kept you waiting. Besides creating wealth for people, Mr. Kamath is also touching millions of lives through his Rainmatter Foundation that he founded 2 years back. And it's doing work on climate. Samir is the CEO of that. Samir, you're here for the last 2 years. I mean, first of all, so what have your experiences besides climate that you're working right now? What all have you tried, and is climate really working right now? Because as we see, the social concerns of this country are so much on education, healthcare, and all that. Climate really doesn't get that kind of the focus, so as to say. So how would you put that?
So thanks Adeep. So yeah, climate is a hyper complex problem, right? And it's in everything. There's no climate problem per se. It's in health, and it's in education and livelihoods. It's in our supply chains and businesses and stock exchanges and all of that, right? Like Nitin and I have this ongoing joke about, if this doesn't work, the stock exchange is dead, and if it works, the stock exchange is dead anyway, right? So I think I mean it's a problem the size of the planet, literally, and in 2022 we have realized that we are likely not staying below 2 degrees, right? So it's got failure rate all over it, right? So why would you pick it up? Why would you pick up something as audacious and stupid as that, right? I think, but it's the same thing, right? Like, see, what Nitin was describing was kind of an audacious goal. You want to become the biggest player in this while being right by the customer. It's a very simple principle, right? You apply it to everything you do, every thought you have, every design you do, but you keep doing that. Some of the outcomes will be failure, some of the outcomes will be success, right? That'll keep happening, right? But if you latch onto a set of principles and keep doing that, and I think it's the same thing with climate, because it's a super complex problem. It affects everything. It is by definition in the intersections, right? It needs civil society, governance, a lot of players with social capital, a lot of innovators, a lot of different people to come together. Can one foundation, can one set of people solve it? I don't think so. Can we start applying these principles, popularizing the ideas, talking to as many people as we can? I think that's what we can do right now. So that's what we're doing.
Nitin, what was the idea behind, going for climate? When there are so many, when we see CSR spends of companies, we see healthcare, education coming right on top. Why did you go for climate?
Yeah, so see, the thing is, firstly, the idea of Rain Matter Foundation came when there was a lot of success as a business, right? And then, this has always bothered me about this whole concentration of wealth problem. And I somehow think it's only going to get worse with time, because I've realized how much more easier it is for me today to make money versus Nitin 10 years back, right? Because the opportunities are so much more. You can leverage on your capital so much more. So I think money will keep going away from the masses to the top, and I think if the people where the wealth is getting concentrated don't do enough, I don't know how this ends well. There's no good outcome, right? As in, eventually this will end bad. And again, right, if you think about it in long enough horizon, if you think about this 20 years, 30 years from now, what is the point of all of this wealth if tomorrow there's a civil war somewhere, right? As in, if you can't walk on the street, what's the point? You're already seeing this in some cities and right around the world, right? So I think tomorrow the question will be asked of people who had the wealth and who had the wherewithal to do something when shit hits the fan tomorrow, right? And you have to be ready. So I don't want to be in a position 20 years from now where, say, my son comes to me and asks, Nitin, Dad, whatever, you had all the resources 20 years back when the world was going to dogs, and why didn't you do anything about it then, right? That's how the idea that we have to do something about this, this whatever wealth is getting concentrated should be used for the betterment of society in some way, is how it started. One of the triggers for this is also, my life guru is, Kailash, who's our CTO, right? And, because I'm a trader, I started my whole life with wanting to buy a Porsche and, like a house with a swimming pool, that was my, my driving ambition for 5-10 years of my life. But once Kailash joined and I, kind of hung around him, I started questioning about a lot of these things. And yeah, so the two problems that we could associate with, one was at Zerodha, right? One of the reasons we are so successful in terms of our profits and etc. is because we've grown very efficiently, right? So we were 1,100 people on the team and we were 1 million customers. We are 1,100 members on the team with 11 million customers, right? We have not had to hire people, right? Now the thing is, you would say amazing, right? As in you made a lot of profits. But in my head, I'm thinking, what about all those jobs that potentially you could have created 10 years back if you were kind of running this business inefficiently? I don't know, it sounds weird, but yeah, but the thing is, I mean, these kind of questions started coming. So one was livelihood creation, right? And I think which is a big problem in this country. And then when we were thinking about it, we realized that if you're going to create jobs, how do you create jobs in this country, right? As in, where will the jobs come? And maybe, we said, maybe it has to be green in color. If you're creating more jobs, it should be. And then this whole idea of, climate change, livelihood came. I mean, it was all over the place. Then, one day I said, we can't keep thinking, we have to get our hands dirty. We found a restoration project in, there was this 100-acre piece of land near Krishnagiri. We drove down one day and we said, what? Okay, I mean, the easiest thing, when someone says climate change is plant trees, right? As in grow a forest. I mean, everyone understands that, right? So, so a bunch of us went and we said, let's take this, let's buy this out because someone was planning to turn it into one of those villa projects. We said, we cannot let that happen. So, and then Samir was running a campsite in that property. And that's really how we met, So, I mean, us, getting our hands dirty led to, Samir joining us, and then Samir helping us kind of define how this should be thought about, because we have full-time jobs. I mean, we are right now two-timing this, in the sense a bunch of us from Zerodha. So we said that we don't really have the bandwidth to do this. So from that original thesis, I mean, it's kind of evolved into something else today, and I think Samir will be the right person for that.
Samir, if I may ask you, are there a couple of ventures that you've funded or some projects that you've undertaken that are really proud of, that have taken off, or you think you haven't still been able to you've just scratched the surface and not have been able to do any meaningful work?
No, I think we are proud of all of them. I mean, people are doing some amazing work out there. Right, and we are merely funding them, right?
But are there specific some examples that you can?
There's Akshay Kalpa that we are involved in a big way, and what's happening at the farm is it's just amazing, right? It's also creating great livelihoods and great incomes at the village level, but the resilience at the farm, the resilience for the natural asset building at the farm itself. That's just amazing. Then there's many organizations like NCF working in conservation, people working in water, people working on large restoration projects in Maharashtra, sea trees around here. There's also people who are working on policy. There are people working on solutions, because like Nitin was saying, we need more green livelihoods. Right, our economy has to get more regenerative for solving this. It's not just going to come from a simple energy transition and a mobility transition, right? So we're trying to stitch all of this together, right? I think we have miles to go in that, right? So while we are very proud of, I mean, we are thankful to all the folks who are doing this out there. I think we have miles to go on this. I don't think we have started to crack this yet.
Can I seek permission from organizers to go on for 10 more minutes? Yeah. Okay. Yeah. And I'll take a couple of more questions and then I'll open the floor for a couple of more from you. Now, on the CSR bit, I wanted to ask, India Inc. has been, because of the mandatory rules that are there, that 2% of the profits that they have to contribute. Over the last 7 years, almost 1 lakh crore has been spent by India Inc. In fact, in 2020-21, it was around 25,000 crore. Do you see the impact of all that money, or despite spending, we are failing? If you can.
No, yes, Samir is going to answer that.
All right. So I think the so I'm speaking from a climate lens largely. I've also,
but also given that you are in that sphere,
yeah.
I mean, do you see enough work is happening? All that money is being spent. Are we seeing the impact of that?
Yeah, climate has started to become important for CSR and philanthropy in the last over the last year, especially as world events have caught up and made it headlines all the time. But even generally, I think intersectional thinking is coming into play a lot more today. You hear about it a lot more. Earlier, it was very siloed, saying I'm doing health, or I'm doing livelihoods, and I'm doing X or Y or Z. People are at least paying some lip service to the idea of intersections today, right? That's happening. The discussions are happening. I think the effectiveness will grow, because today you can spend on energy and worsen water. You can spend on income and actually worsen livelihoods and worsen, the health numbers for any place. So like somebody asked us, what happens to the place when you fix one variable and destroy three others? What are you doing to the place? Right? So that holistic approach or a slightly more holistic approach to problem solving, I think that question is setting in. The systems thinking for that has become a little bit of a buzzword, but I think the tools are coming into play. And I think and you're also starting to see some collaboration in the Indian philanthropy and CSR space. So as this starts to happen more, the quality of the problem solving will improve dramatically. And I mean, it's sad I have to say it, but that climate is a great way to bring this together, because it cuts across almost everything that we see.
Nathan, your thoughts on that? No, you don't want to touch
No, I mean, see, the thing is,
when you see around, just look at Bangalore lakes.
Right.
Why should it become national news every year?
Right. Yeah, no, I mean, you're getting me. No, I haven't really tried to map out if all the money has gone to the right places. Like, no, I haven't thought through. Now that you've spoken about it, I'll think about it. But I somehow it seems like the impact isn't there. But the thing is, you're talking a problem of 150 crore people. Like, 1 lakh crores, maybe not enough to even impact 150 crore people, right? As in,
no, that's what. Are you seeing at least of that? Are we seeing that? Is it happening the way?
No, that's what. So the thing is, I think to solve India's problem, you probably need a lot more money, right? I mean, 1 lakh crore rupees is probably enough for a country with 10 million population, and maybe not 1.5. I'm talking like a businessman, right? I mean, I'm not. I'm saying if 150 crore people are there and there is 1 lakh crores. I mean, I don't know. I mean, incrementally, I don't know how much you can use that much money to create a difference in 150 crore people's life. Maybe it's not enough, or maybe it's not really going to the right places. I really, I don't have an answer to this because I haven't really thought about this.
Recently, one more trend has started that we see earlier companies used to take the project and execute it, like you are doing through your foundation. Now people are giving the money to PM Cares Fund, and they are just saying, okay. Now, how do you see that sort of, because then if you aspire to do something to bring a meaningful impact or change in, say, society or to the city that you belong to, if you don't get your hands dirty into it, then.
See, the thing is, we were coincidentally discussing on something similar lines. So I think, I know a lot of my friends who are entrepreneurs who've done well and who have an intent to give back and or give forward or invest for the future, right? But I think there is like a trust barrier, right? And so whatever mandatory is required, they'll go do it. I think wherever is the most trust that lies, right? And maybe it's the question is also for the other side is saying is the social sector doing enough to build trust amongst entrepreneurs to allocate capital to them? Right, because I can tell you that a lot of new wealth, at least in Bangalore, a lot of these people are willing to go ahead and like people like me. At some point we said we need to get our hands dirty and we can't allocate money without knowing what we're doing, right? But not everyone has the time, bandwidth, resources to be able to get their hands dirty, right? So they will really do what is the easiest thing to do, which is to allocate money to someone else, and amongst allocating to someone else, the most trusted is government. I mean, if I want to keep my money in the safest place, I'll go buy tax-free bonds. I mean, I will not, or I'll buy, government securities. I wouldn't, even go put it in HDFC Bank or whatever, right? So it's like that, So I think a lot more has to be done for the social sector to kind of garner trust, because I think capital will flow if that were to happen in us.
I can take a couple of questions if, yeah, okay.
Thank you. My question might be a little naive, so excuse me. You guys work on climate and you'll want to set up new green jobs. But the new green jobs makes me a little uncomfortable in itself. You come from an old industry that's bringing in money into a new industry. When will the old industry itself change to become more green? And do you think it's like this? And are there two different worlds, or are we in one world?
No, I mean, I think, like I said, I have more questions in my life than answers right now. So, see, the thing is, as a business, wherever we've had an opportunity to go green, we have done it. Like, when COVID happened, I think the first thing kind of we realized is that, the problem is, we never thought that work from home ever can work, right? But as soon as we realized work from home works, we decided we should go permanent work from home, right? Because we said, these, out of 1,100 people, like 800 people are outside Bangalore, right? So there are 800 families lesser choking the city, right? And these people are now in smaller towns and villages, and they're creating economies out there. So in my head, I think it's a greener job. I mean, is it green? I don't know, right? But the fact that they're probably consuming much lesser than what they would in a city like Bangalore, they're probably creating an economy around them, and probably their quality of life also has gone up, right? So yes, I think like, for example, we can really do whatever we can. Now newer green jobs, I don't know. Like I said, we're trying to support a bunch of causes. We're trying to learn along the way. I don't know if I have the answers. I know, Samir, if you have anything around.
Yeah, so it's like you're born into a network of current functions and roles and things around you. We are sitting in a very well-lit auditorium with central air conditioning on a nice cool day in Bangalore, right? We make all these trade-offs. You're going to use coal to find your way to renewables, right? So there's a path. I think if we can imagine a new network and keep chipping away at it at some scale, the main thing is it has to start mainstreaming. So the government comes in a big way over there, right? So I don't think it's a hard binary. Yes, we have to get rid of the old world, of the current old world, right? Have we imagined the new world? Are we moving fast enough to get there at scale for my and his kids to have enough tools to deploy when we are gone? I think those are questions. We don't have answers to, but we're hoping we'll get there.
Question from there, yeah.
Hello. Yeah, Namaskar. I'm Satya from Odisha. My question is that actually with regards to the CSR fund, lastly you were sharing, we have seen in Odisha, because with the FC fund earlier it was coming, we have seen near about 10,000 crores something. But now the CSR fund has a heavy. But as in Odisha also we are looking, most of the CSR fund are utilized in urban development, even if they are imposed by the government, different departments, and they're using it instead of rural development, specifically for the tribals and all things. We should go forward actually to the, even if it through the civil society organizations, but which is not going actually properly. And so this is the big challenge actually, because what is your view on this actually? But CSR fund is heavy, like more than 20,000 crores. So which can be, the rural can be developed very better way.
Thank you for your views. Yeah. Anything?
You're right. There is a wonkiness to even in aspirational districts. Apparently, only 6 of all the aspirational districts get over half the funding. So it's not well distributed. And we are working with think tanks and partners who are trying to address this. We're working with people who are trying to work with CSR. Our interest is to, of course, bias them towards being pro-biodiversity, pro-climate in all their interventions, right? But as part of this, these problems do come up, yes.
Okay, we'll squeeze in one last question, yeah, please.
Hi, this is actually for both of you. Nitin, as you look back with growing Zerodha, if there was something that you wish you had done entirely differently, what would that be? And then even with setting up the foundation, right? I know it's a young foundation, but are there things that you look back that you think you would have thought about differently or done differently? And can you tell us about that?
So yeah, no, I think, I think about quite a bit, saying, if I go back in time, what will I change? I don't think I'll change anything, because I've just been so lucky so many times that any small change, I think I'll not be here today. So I'm almost fearful about that. So yeah, so I mean, I think we've made mistakes, etc. But if we had not made mistakes, I don't think we would have taken actions that we did. So I can't like I keep thinking about it, like what will I change? I think about going back to school, in my 10th standard, if I had studied well for my maths exam, would with my mom. But I don't think I would be here. I would have probably done engineering from a good college and then gone become something else. So yeah, so I can't really think of what I could have done differently. So.
I think it's the same for the foundation. I mean, I think it's a common DNA in everything Zerodha touches now. It's about foundational principles. I mean, if you can get too weighed by trying to measure it as failure and success, or success as well, because we are sometimes too eager to define success. So the joke is that assume that you have only 3 years to go and you're dead after that, right? So plan for 3 years. Have a 20-year vision, as he was describing, for the customers as well. But plan your actions for 3 years. Don't assume you're going to be around for 3 years. So don't get too hung up on success or failure. Arrive at a decent set of principles that you can keep working with on a continuous set and evolve. We are in the middle of a fairly large rethink and redo structurally and organizationally, but that's what you wake up and do on any given morning.
Okay, I know there are many more questions, but I think you can address to him them directly to him. With that, we bring this session. So you can ask after he's around. He's around. We won't let him go. So you can ask him your questions. Yeah. Thank you so much for the. Let's now go on to the next session. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Nitin, Sameer, and Sandeep, for a great conversation. Please accept a small token of our gratitude. Thank you. To wrap up this day full of failure stories and learnings from the developmental sector, with our next segment, we hope to bring in a slightly different perspective. We go a bit personal on this one. Can we please have on stage Mr. Sandeep Rao with a big round of applause, and I invite Harish sir to moderate the session.
Thanks, Sandeep, for accepting the invite here. And but I don't want to take anything, but I would like you to start your journey.
Firstly, thank you. This is the only way I could get into the IIM Bangalore. I figured I'll take the invitation. Mom was so proud; she had tears in her eyes. But thank you. It's lovely to be here with all of you and to finally. The thing is, when Rachita called me 2 weeks back and said, we're doing this as a part of the SELCO Foundation, talking about impact and failures, I started, and she asked me to come and speak about this, and I realized, man, I've got a lot of failures to talk about. So how do I make it not all about myself, but also try to resonate with what all of you are trying to make sense of with what you do? So for me, I think the biggest learning is I've been in the space of stand-up for the past 13 years, and it's a very individual space if you want it to be, but at the same time you can make it a very noisy space if you choose to go down that path. And both those are points of failure which I've realized, right? One is an internal value system, one is an external value system. And if you want to also just take in the aspect of the fact that I'm visually impaired and had this eye condition for the past 30 odd years now, you're automatically seen as a failure by society, which is a great thing because the standard's really low, so you don't have to do much to succeed. So, yeah, I think the internal value system of failure is such an important thing because it's something that you can perceive through your reality and perceive through your sense of what matters to you. But the external value system is what we're all conditioned to sort of believe in, right? The success aspect is so damn gorgeous, as Nitin was saying. It's the Porsches, it's the fancy house, it's the Louis Vuitton bags, and it's the pat on the back, or it's the bonus, or it's the boys club or the girls club. Failure is always like this plummeting feeling in your sphincter, this sense of rejection, this blame, shame, guilt, and fear, and it's not an attractive place to be, right? So it's a very difficult space in the external value system, because we all want our kids or our parents want us or we want our friends to do well, but then it also becomes this cluster of ones where someone else's success is your failure as opposed to just staying in that space. But if you shift, I feel in the internal system, it isn't as black and white, right? It can be a learning for you to look at what you've done, or rather sometimes what you've not done well, as a way to kind of proceed in a direction which you would have not gone down if you had succeeded, if that makes sense. So yeah, that's kind of where I am, and after a few more beers, maybe I'll have some more thoughts on.
Where did you get the beer from?
I haven't got it yet, so
yeah, because in I'm not sure about that.
That's what the B stands for.
Yeah.
We need to change that, right?
Exactly. So now you said that you have failed so much. Where have you succeeded?
Yeah, being here, I suppose, yeah. I think, it's such a beautiful thing. If you want to make it sound romantic, you can say failure is the most amazing thing. But no, failure hurts. It makes you think and makes you spend a lot more time with yourself without the distractions that success brings. And that time you spend with yourself is scary. It makes you look within. It makes you ask questions about your way of looking at things, and most importantly, of why you're doing what you're doing. I'll give you an example. In stand-up, what's the simplest thing to do? Not the simplest, but what's the most basic thing? Make people laugh. But my God, the number of people I've heard, comedians, bringing in excuses for why they couldn't do it. Like, oh, they don't speak my language. Oh, they don't get my frame of context. And that's the noise. That's the external systems, right? Man, he got Netflix, I got Amazon Prime, he got YouTube, I got 5 views, he got Spotify, I got, All India Radio. I mean, God forbid. Whatever the thing is. But that's what I mean by the external. The external is so much of not making people laugh being the focus, because if that's your job, then you just find a way to make any room of people you're presenting in front of laugh. But no, it's 30, and strangely, 2019, I was stuck in that space, because I'm sure all of you can kind of understand this place. If you are constantly waiting for external validation from your peers or from society at large, or for those big ticket wins, then you're at the mercy of being pulled in different directions. And there are a lot of people to do that. In fact, there's a career which people take up in manipulation, right? Where when you do badly, they're at your shoulder. They're like, that's okay, you're a really funny guy, just that the audience doesn't get you. But you know what? It's fine. When you do well, they're like, yeah, but you're not as funny as X-comedian. I can drop names, but why? And it becomes that you are never centered, you're never balanced. You're constantly better than someone, worse off than someone. Someone better than you means you're not as good. So that's where I mean the failure is most visual. It's most sort of crushing in that sense, right? That's when they show people in movies, like the comedian, he almost takes sleeping pills and a bottle of scotch, and next thing he wakes up going, no, I'm going to write a new joke, and next thing he's riding off into the sunset, or the comedic sunset, with an Oscar or a BAFTA, whichever award. But that's not even what matters, because the internal conversation is something that gets you going, right? It's like, I'm here to make people laugh, and it doesn't mean if I sell 1,000 tickets or 10 tickets, each process is something that I enjoy. And I don't want to say the byproduct is fame or success, but it could or couldn't happen. But if you enjoy that little small win, it just makes that moment more successful. I feel, yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Sandeep, see, the question is, in the last, as we were speaking before, you have diversified into looking at these podcasts right now, right? In a sense, why?
I love talking, and not many people were coming for my shows, so I figured I'd just do it on the internet. I think the lockdown gave me a sense of what I really enjoy doing. So I did a series during the lockdown called Life Gone Wrong, basically a podcast covering how people who've experienced adversity in some shape or form have taken stock of what they have and done something with it. And that led me to look at myself, because the two biggest things is, one is it ties into failure, because we're kind of, if I was looking for the longest time at life or things around me from a very different lens. I was looking at attributing my disability or eye condition, saying I can't do some things. I'm unable to, therefore I will always be envious of someone who can go jogging or driving, or someone who can read a book, or someone who can make eye contact with an attractive girl or guy, or you're always coming from this place of I can't, so it's never going to be a place of I can. So I shifted that, saying, okay, there are things I can't do. I can't drive, which probably a good thing. I can't go jogging because you know what? It's tiring. And so you start looking at the things you can do, which is, I like talking. I like understanding. I like being curious. I like meeting new people. I like making people laugh. I like spending time with close friends. So when you work from that premise, you're not always feeling rejected. And that's something I enjoyed. So then I started talking to people on the podcast, started getting this nice sort of energy from them. And then being locked up, the platforms which were allowing you to put up stuff became less studio oriented about quality of sound, so you could do it from your Zoom or from your computer, Zoom recording. And then I realized, wait, I can sit here instead of flying them down, putting them up in a hotel, getting a studio, getting all these props. I can reach out to anyone around the world and I can talk to them about anything and everything. And that's pretty much the description of my podcast. It's the Soapy Rao Show, fun conversation with people about anything and everything. And sometimes I've written to a neuroscientist, to a mathematician, and they're like, a comedian who wants to interview, they're like, you want to roast us? I'm like, no, trust me, I don't have equation jokes, So it just makes every day when I have a recording that much more interesting, because it's sort of self-reflecting as well. And just to add to that, the second point, besides the looking at life from a point of what you do have versus what you don't have, the biggest thing that helped me is this process of unlearning, where unlearning the way you are, the way you think, the way you look at things you do, look at the friendships, the relationships, why you have them, and that question starts coming up. Why am I doing this? Why am I a stand-up comedian? Is it for the fame, or is it for the laughs, or is it for satisfaction? Is it for the money? Or why am I playing a certain, why am I not playing or going back to, because when I was young I used to play golf, and since my eyesight's progressed, it's worse now, I was like scared of not hitting the ball. But since I changed from the outcome of being a really good golfer to winning a tournament, now the question is, why am I playing? Because I enjoy going out. And as of 2 weeks back, we've introduced the concept of blind golf to India, and that's something that people are catching on to, which is good for them, Thank you. Yeah.
What has, before I ask questions from the audience for that, which is what's been your biggest failure?
I think not respecting myself. Yeah. Because it's a sense of self-loathing which kind of helps you latch on to these external value systems, right? Like, oh, you need to fit in, you need to be the cool guy, the funny guy. But if you get a sense of balance and you start asking every question from yourself to outward versus outward to within, I think you will realize that you have quite a lot of wisdom and you have a lot of integrity maybe not integrity all the time, but you have a lot of things that you can answer yourself, which you waste a lot of time going around the world asking, and then eventually you come back to yourself going, wait, it was right here all the time.
What would be the best support system for, if you look at, for a comedian who's failing? I mean, I'm not saying you're failing, but the question is, for a person who's thinking self-loathing, what is the best support system that a comedian would have to bank on to move forward?
I think to take a step back from other comedians, first of all, because we're a toxic bunch of people. The moment we scent blood, we're like, he's not funny, let's just let's cancel him. No, it's, I think you need to have some reality outside, because here, another thing we do, right, with whatever job it may be, the moment we start taking it too seriously, that's the failing of that job, because we're like, oh, you know, us comedians, when we sit down, society needs us, we hold a mirror to it. No one needs you, dude. Like, trust me, if you're not there, people will laugh. People will laugh at...
Are you talking also of the graduates of this institute? Like,
sure, I haven't... No, I think anyone, if anything is not indispensable, right? Like if anything is done with so much thing, like I've heard comedians going with all these things, but why is it that then you have one comedian going viral and then the next 9 funny things on YouTube is like a cat taking a piss on thing? Like people can laugh and will find something to laugh at. So you don't need, and I have some comedians who said in the past, like, oh, I like doing, you know, dark jokes. I'm like, what do you mean? And the jokes are not even dark and they're not even a joke. So the thing is that you got to understand what it's, you know, in the moment sometimes you get typecast, right? Oh, you're doing dad jokes, or you're doing slapstick humor. I'm like, why are we putting all these things with anyone? Why are we putting so many boxes and confining an individual to that form of representation? Because they might be able to do multiple boxes, right? And I don't mean, of course, skill-wise, I'm just saying expression-wise. And if you take what you do with a little lighter heart and not so much pressure on yourself to succeed or whatever your idea and the external ideas of success are, those small steps of approaching that become more fun, and I think the outcome, if you want to focus on that, ends up being more fulfilling, if not successful.
Thanks, Sandeep. Questions, please, for Sandeep. Anybody?
That good, huh?
Yeah, either.
That bad. What has he said over the past 10 minutes?
Why didn't he tell any joke yet? So that, my guess, that's... No, yeah. Sandeep, see, the question is, where do you see, I mean, in a sense, there are people in the audience who come from different countries, from Europe to countries in Africa, per se, and most of them come from the sphere of climate and development, per se, right? And they've all come to this conference for, basically, in a country like ours, or in the world, in the development sector, we have no failures. Yeah. The only sector which has no failure where no development has happened. So, so we, if you think you self-loathe yourself, we privately self-loathe, right? And that is why we had this conference first. So how do we bring out people? And what would you say? I mean, are you also getting into climate jokes?
Not. As long as Greta Thunberg has an Instagram account, never. I get smashed back into a carbon morsel. You know, the interesting thing is, I'm not an expert in any field, right? I just like listening to human beings and sometimes talking over them. But what I find is the metrics which people fixate on and the things that people use to gauge performance. Because I recently interviewed this lady, and I'm going to give her the credit because she's made a lot of sense when she said that. She's a Swedish lady who is focuses on focus. That's what she talks about, and she said a lot of the things that might be repeated themes in our society is peak performance, right? Be a better version of yourself. Look forward to enhancing your skills or becoming this particular thing. But that in itself, it takes away from doing what is required, because it's the moment the outcome is the focus and not the process of doing. So what she says is basically focus is living a life, and I'm paraphrasing, living a life where you've taken out most of the irrelevant things. So I've been looking at some of the things I've done through that filter, and we waste so much time worrying about how we are seen. And I'm not saying even at work, I'm just saying how we want to impress people because they might speak badly of us or might not accept us into their group, or we worry about how we're going to look at the 10th reunion of our school, or which university we didn't go to, as opposed to why are we even going there? Are we going to go for that party or the reunion and have fun, or still be like, gosh, why am I here? And many of us have that feeling, whether it's at university or job, we're like, why are we here? But we spend so much time getting there, so does that make any sense?
Right. So Sandeep, I mean, I can ask this question to Sandeep because I've heard him before, and please don't judge that it's politically incorrect.
And from the same town, almost.
Yeah.
Almost. Our ancestors.
Yeah, that's so. We have the same bad genes, but
yeah, but terrible. Yeah.
What are the advantages of being partially blind?
I think
you have commented on that before, so.
Well,
which people will not realize because he's blind, etc.
Right. So
you have multiple advantages.
I have a joke about this, and I'm going to tell the joke first because just to give you guys a little respite from failure. The thing in India, when you say you're partially blind, firstly people think you failed at being blind. I mean, it almost is like they're disappointed with your lack of commitment. They're like, can't you work harder? Be fully blind. Like I've come 4th rank in the class of blindness, So yeah, it's and I mean, I remember this vividly when I was doing a talk and this talk was different. It was smaller, it was at a bar in the afternoon, and this guy comes, he's like, Sandeep, I've seen you at a show and I really loved your talk about your journey as a visually impaired person, as a partially blind comedian. Will you be speaking about the same thing today? He thought that I go for different talks, making up different disabilities. So, and I was like, this is the only thing I have. I don't. So, there are some stereotypes. What I've realized is, sometimes I have friends and acquaintances who are completely blind, and in some sense it's harder, but in some sense you don't really have anything to see, right? So you belong to a certain group and you're treated as a person who belongs to that group. If you're fully sighted, you belong to a certain group. These partially blind guys annoy everyone. They can see a little bit and they can't see a little bit. So the blind guys get a little jealous. The people who are sighted, we have to help them. So I've noticed it's not a problem, but you have to find where you belong. And that was something that tore me in different directions, right? You want to impress. I mean, it's weird, even in dating, who do you go for, right? Like, you go on a blind date, no pun intended. Like, if you go with someone who's blind as well, you're sitting at 2 different tables, you never end up meeting your date, right? You go with someone sighted, you're so terrified that they'll find out, and that way you have to go half an hour before, you have to set up everything in the right place, and then someone comes, who's going to pay the bill? You're like, oh crap, what's the amount, right? So there's so many fears. But it also can, as I said, if you've changed the focus from partially blind to partially sighted, changes it a bit. Yeah, I mean, that sounded a bit cheesy, I'm sorry.
No,
now I'm 4th rank in sighted people.
No, because some years ago said the good part is that being a comedian, partially blind comedian, that you had no competition. Is that true?
Absolutely. But now there are 2 others. Yeah.
Oh, is it?
And they're more blind than me.
Oh.
And they're women, so I've lost the market. Like, that's it. Yeah. Woke culture has thrown me out. No, but I did say that it was actually something which got me into trouble, because I said I'm India's only, the advantage of being India's only blind comedian is that I can't see my competition, right? And some person commented on this social media post saying, how dare you say you're India's only blind comedian, you're visually impaired, there's another girl who's actually blind, you better take this post down. And I was angry, right? I was a man, 39-year-old man who was angry, so I went to that comment and I said, sorry. Because you don't mess with social justice warriors, So,
how do you get trolled?
I don't. That's when I'm glad I'm blind. I can't see those comments. But I've gotten, people on YouTube. I don't know what the YouTube rationale is. I put up a video a long time back about Kannadigas and having some jokes about North Indians, and everyone just took off on me. And and it wasn't about my eyes saying, "You blind guy, how dare you?" It was like, "You're gay." That was all of it. Like, I was like, wow, what is this? Is there like an algorithm just taking these comments and putting it on me? Is there a sign I should be listening to? Tell my wife, like, I think there's something they're onto. But yeah, it was strange. I don't really spend too much time on social media because it kind of messes with my head.
Thanks. Question?
Yeah, Harish, I have a question for Sandeep.
Sure. Yeah.
Hi, Sandeep.
No clue where you are, but hello.
No.
Yeah.
So my question to you is, why there's so little political comedy in the country? That is why are comedians not speaking up truth to power? Is failure written all over that because of the heavy hand of the state? Do you guys discuss this in your circles? Is someone willing
Well,
to
I don't think people in politics in our country have a sense of humor. So when that's, be it whatever state of politics, whether it's the state level, the city level, and you need your audience to have a sense of humor, otherwise you might as well just go slap them, right? I mean, because anything you say is going to offend them. And I think more than making jokes about someone, I think learning to laugh at yourself is a good thing to do, because otherwise it's very easy to use this external thing that, oh, he's attacking me, so they'll get the entire troll army or the other armies who are predominant in our country to go after someone, because it takes a little bit of maturity to get humor. I'm not saying intellect, I'm saying a little bit of sense that, you know what, I can be wrong. I did probably mess up that entire, country's GDP. It's okay, I can take a joke. Hey, I've ruined 1 million lives. What's a joke? But no, it's more like, wow, what it is, how dare you, I'll beat him up. I mean, how childish is that, right? Like, you'll probably see that in the kindergarten sandpit, right? Like, what, you call me fat, I'm going to throw sand on you. That's our politics. That's where our politicians are. And so Kunal Kamra is a friend of mine, and he's come home and stayed, and we haven't met in a while, so I don't want to comment on his comedy or what his strategy or whatever his direction is, but he's a funny guy, right? But what's happened now is that he's driven into this particular hat on this role he's playing by his fans, and I suppose that's good because he sells out shows across the world. So people clearly want to hear it, the audience. And the thing is, in comedy sometimes, political comedy gets, because it's so sort of sensitive and it goes to the level of you being threatened with your life or your family or your family's lives, or your shows being cancelled, or you being pelted with stones, or some other comedian being banned from a city. I mean, what are we talking about? Comedians? Or are we talking about like spies for the state, right? It just sounds like it's such drastic measures. But good comedy takes discussion, it takes back and forth, and none of that's happening. So we can't have good political comedy until we have more of it. So to have one good comedian about dark jokes, or if you want to call it like, risque jokes, you need to have 100 of them doing it. But if you have one person doing jokes on political comedy, obviously it's going to be mediocre, or it's going to be very sort of skewed towards a certain direction. So we need many more people to do it. We need hundreds of people, hundreds of shows on TV in different languages, in whichever platform, and as a result, you will start getting quality political humor, I think, yeah.
I thought we were also talking of the development sector, because we also are the same. So anyway. Yes, Manoj.
TV channels biggest?
Are your biggest competitor?
No. I mean, there's a lot of money there. But TV comedy is very different, right? Because you'll have someone standing there saying, laugh, and everyone goes, ha, ha, ha. So I had that in a show once. I did a show for, I think, MSNBC. It was one of their things where Salman Khan was a judge. So you can imagine the caliber of that show. It was I mean, I did a joke saying, it was great growing up in India as a person who couldn't see, because even I could drive, and that's like someone else we know. And he didn't get the joke. I was like, wow. I know. Fortunately, that evening... No, fortunately, that evening he had his driver with him, so I did my research. But TV comedy is nothing wrong with it. There's a market for it. And of course, Kapil Sharma and Sunil Pal and the likes of that circus, they call, what's it called? The comedy circus. It's huge. There is a market for that, and I wouldn't take that away from people who love it. But it's not a competitor. I think now with Netflix and Amazon, that was what I was telling Harish as well, right? I was so obsessed with that at one point in 2019 that I wasn't enjoying my shows. I was worried about, and when I recorded my special at the beginning of 2020, I wrote to Netflix, I wrote to Amazon, and none of them were responding with what I wanted to hear. They're like, yeah, we like your jokes, but we're not taking your special because you have only 1,500 followers on Instagram. I'm like, that's what they're looking at. They're not looking at only funny. They're looking at how many people you can draw to their platform. So when you detach yourself from your profession or from your art form or your work and say, you know what, I am still going to be this person. It might hurt a little bit, but I'll get over it tomorrow. And you distance it. But if you're attached, that if I fail at comedy, I'm a failure as a human being, that's very difficult to get out of. So to answer your question, which I clearly haven't yet, I think there is a space for everyone. And I think when you focus on what you do from a place of why you do, you will find that place. I think so, yeah. All of this is just, I think so. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. Last question.
Hi.
Hello.
Thank you for this. I actually want to go back to something that Harish, you just commented on. It seemed like you're talking about the social sector when you said that can't take a joke. And I'm just going to stick my neck out and say I think that's true. We can't laugh at ourselves. We take ourselves a little too seriously. And maybe that's also a reason why there are no failures in the sector. So I'm curious to know from you, what are things that you think that we could do as a sector or even as individuals to not take ourselves so seriously, right? The work that we do is important, not taking away from that, but it's a role that we play. And how do we remember that? And how do we sort of have those conversations more often? And how do we laugh more in the sector?
Oof. Is there an opening as a consultant role? Anyway. No, I think obviously the work all of you do has a lot more at stake because other lives are impacted by it. If I do a bad joke, it's just me who's going to be a little, they don't like me. So I think the biggest help for me, I think a lot of people say learn from your mistakes, right? I've realized to unlearn. Every time you do something which has not gone your way, like for instance, last week I told you about the Blind Golf Initiative, I went with these expectations, right? And let's compare those expectations of hitting a 300-yard drive and being celebrated, carried on people's shoulders. Oh my God, this guy is the next blind Tiger Woods or the blind Woods or the blind Tiger, whatever you want to call him. And I had all these things on the way to the course. And I went there, the first ball, I think I gouged out enough mud to make a lake for that area. And I was shattered, right? Like the entire day, I just had stress on my shoulders. And that's obviously this sense of failure. And if you want to compare that to a project, I think we're more carried away sometimes, and I'm not taking away from any of the work any of you do. Sometimes the narrative is so fixed by our conditioning that we have to win, we have to have these award ceremonies where we suddenly, every time we look at a project, we're like have this medal being, put around our neck, and we're like being, everyone's like, oh wow, a bottle of champagne, great. Why don't you do it when you fail? Because that doesn't matter. Like, give yourself a good dinner when you don't do well, because, I mean, you're still the same person, right? And you might feel better because when you don't do well, you're in fact going to look at that problem saying, how can I approach it differently? Unlearn the way you've done that and say, you know what, it's okay. It's not easy. I'm not saying any of this is easy, but it's more healthy. Let's put it that way. Your blood panels look better this year if you think in that way. Because otherwise it's constantly just building up this sense, this tightness in your body that I have to do it, someone else will do it better, someone else will get to that joke quicker, someone else will be funnier, someone else will be popular. Otherwise, if everyone just comes from this premise saying, yeah, it's okay, you know what, I'm going to unlearn, I'm going to kind of look at why I'm doing this. And we all come from that place. I think life isn't that serious to be looked at so seriously, I think.
Thanks, Anand. Last couple of advice to the audience.
Oh my God. Yeah.
I had a question.
Sure.
I'm
here.
here.
Yeah, anyway. Yeah.
Here.
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Hi, Sandeep.
Hello.
So I'm going to go back to what you talked about, self-loathing. And since we are talking about failure here, failure does induce a lot of self-loathing and, low self-esteem. So as a person with disability, which often becomes a focus point, people sort of invisibilize the mental health aspect because they are constantly focusing on, oh, you have visual or auditory impairment, or whatever is for any person. So how do you think the mental health aspect gets lost with people with disability? And do you think that needs to be also taken in account?
I think all of us have mental health issues, in some shape or form. And I think now, again, there are broad brushstrokes being applied, like saying you are anxious or you are depressed. But there are so many sort of nuances within that. And I think we need to respect that, because the moment we say someone has a mental health issue, of course, they have to address it, get professional help. But if someone questions that and says, how is it, we demonize that person saying, you don't understand. So all this comes from a place of not kind of finding a mutual conversation. And I think it is, of course, harder, especially with, if you add a disability, you add socioeconomic disadvantages. It is hard, and you do need some of those successes, money, you need security to help you get out of that trap. But all the things I've said today it's not going to take you from 0 to 100, but it basically gave me a sense of starting with myself, whether it's asking and I think Nikhil mentioned this, right? It's something what's sort of helped me is stop asking for answers and start asking the right questions. And that helps you face whatever you have to with a little bit more balance from your place. Of course, you have absolutely no control with anything around you, whether it's even your family. Like you wake up in the morning, you don't know what your mom's going to tell you, or your dad, or your partner, right? And you want it to be positive, but if you are coming from a place where you're already anticipating that, oh, they're going to say, you're so lazy, you woke up late, you're going to start the entire conversation from outside. It's never going to be silent inside. You're constantly working on your distractions. There's no time to look at yourself. So I think just, of course, not taking away from professional help or any kind of thing that a person needs, but this, I think, if you ask me for last thing which helped me is these two things. I think unlearning, focusing on what you can take away, the things sometimes we take for granted aren't necessary in our lives. And I think more than only sort of saying, it's about progress, it's about achievement, or it's about getting to the next stage. I think just start, listening to your internal voice or internal set of values after you kind of take away what you don't need, because then you kind of face the world from a place that you are a little bit more comfortable in, as opposed to a place where you're constantly being pulled apart. Yeah.
Thank you, Sandeep. Thank you for all, and big applause for thank you.
Thank you.
Please, thank you very much. Wait a sec. Yeah. Sure.
Thanks so much.
Thank you, Sandeep and Harish sir, for an entertaining conversation. I request you to please accept our token of appreciation. A big round of applause for Mr. Sandeep Rao.
If you think we are done with failures, we are not. We are covering failures in health, livelihoods, and clean energy systems tomorrow. We will be starting at 9:30 a.m. There are 4 parallel sessions planned on grassroots champions, failures in housing, a workshop on documenting failures, and learnings from scaling biogas. For the evening, we will be joined by Jaideep Verma, who is going to discuss cricket through a very fascinating, although uncomfortable lens. And finally, there are some musical failures waiting for us tomorrow. Bangalore-based band Swaratma is going to delight us with some inside band information and their beautiful melodies. And with that, we are ending the day 1 of Impact Failure Conclave 2022. So would we call it a failure or a success, Geetu?
Let's find out tomorrow. It was a pleasure to have you all with us for Impact Failure Conclave 2022. We hope you rest well and see you tomorrow with fresh minds and new failure stories. Goodbye and have a nice evening.
Thank you.
This is a separate announcement for all the partners of Dune Foundation that are here. I'd request you all to stay back just for a minute or two so that we can regroup.